Cool Figure TV. Revolutionary salute. Revolutionary salute. Like, share, subscribe. Welcome to the House of Revolution. You know I'm your humble host. Do y'all mean a revolution? And what do we have here? U.S. soldiers, Spanish mercenaries arrested for a plot on the Venezuelan president, the revolutionary Nicolas Maduro, busted. Before we get into that, I'm gonna need y'all to wipe y'all feet. That means hit the like button. You in the House of Revolution. Like, share, subscribe, support the platform, y'all. Salute, Queen. You know, let's go back to this story 10 days ago when the U.S. Navy soldier, he's a soldier for the U.S. government, was thrown under the bus. The U.S. act like he didn't exist, and he was arrested in Venezuela. Now, I got the update on that, but let's just go back to their lies. And I told y'all, CIA was working with this man, but now we know why. But let's just go back to this story real quick.
A U.S. Navy sailor is being detained in Venezuela. Authorities are saying the sailor was traveling there unauthorized on personal business when he was taken into custody. News Nation's Xavier Walton has the story. Xavier, what are government officials saying about the timing of all of this?
Hey, Marky, good morning. You know, this comes at a time when the United States and Venezuela are really, when it comes to their relationship, it's pretty tense. Officials still don't know why this U.S. Navy sailor was actually detained. And that's why some people, you know, they're saying that the timing of all of this is a little bit suspicious. Let's get to what the Pentagon is saying, which, to be completely honest, is not much. But here's the statement that they have released saying the U.S. Navy is looking into this and working closely with the State Department. Officials at this point have not named this sailor. However, they have said that he was not approved leave by the U.S. military or on official travel to Venezuela when this happened. Pentagon officials saying the sailor was taken into Venezuelan custody around August 30th, so less than a week ago. Now, the reason some believe the timing of all this is a little bit suspicious because earlier this week,
this was 10 days ago. I got the update. I show you the updated story with all these that this sailor, all the weapons he got caught with. You're gonna be like, oh, now one day they denounced him, one day they done him like Peter did you. I don't know you, sir. Never knew you. For the rooster king crow 3 times. I don't know you. U.S. sailor. I know y'all don't know him no more.
The U.S. seized Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro's plane over alleged sanction violations. That plane, it's like the equivalent to Air Force One, okay? So there's that, plus President Biden and his administration have questioned this summer's re-election results that kept President Maduro—
Who the hell are y'all to question Venezuela elections, nigga?
—in power. Here's White House National Secretary.
Anyway, I just need to update. I need to remind y'all, because I covered that story. We played this video, and they didn't know him. They didn't know why he was in Venezuela. Remember, that's very important. Oh, yeah, he's a U.S. sailor. We don't know why he was in Venezuela. This is very suspicious. This may be retaliation for Nicolas Maduro. We seized his plane. Oh, really? So you telling me this don't got nothing to do with this? He was arrested for this?
Turning to the situation in Venezuela, the government says that it has seized 400 U.S. rifles and arrested—
So you mean to tell me 400 military elite weapons? You don't know nothing about this U.S. government?
Foreigners, including 3 Americans, 2 people from Spain and 1 Czech citizen, were also arrested. Venezuela's interior minister is claiming they were linked to an alleged plot to destabilize the country. One was identified as an American—
Now, this is a Miami news station. They love to destabilize. See, they come over here to foreign us, and then they want to overthrow Cuba, overthrow Venezuela, overthrow Haiti. It's all kind of crap. But they say he wanted to destabilize. Not true. All other stations who were reporting on this say no. They wanted to assassinate Nicolas Maduro. So we got 3 U.S. citizens. We know one of them was in the U.S., was a soldier. Probably all 3 of them is soldiers that have been denounced. They might get the goddamn death penalty, and the U.S. acting like they don't know him no more. Yeah, I knew you wouldn't know him once they got caught with 400 weapons.
Navy sailor who was detained earlier this month while visiting on personal travel. A State Department spokesman—
What happens in America if the Venezuelan gangs, these is gang members in the Navy and stuff going over there to cause drama? We don't want that in America. We denouncing that. So why is the Americans in Venezuela with 400 weapons and talking about committing crimes, but in America we denouncing that? We don't see. It's Tit for tat. We don't want crimes being done here, and we don't want Americans going to Venezuela taking these, Lord have mercy, weapons of war.
Spokesman tells CBS News that the Biden administration knows of the arrest and was, quote, aware of unconfirmed reports with regard to the others arrested.
Yeah, but I know y'all don't know him no more, right? Y'all never seen the U.S. sailor. Oh, he wandered off, dereliction of duty. Oh, we know. But all right, let's look at this, because every other station that's reporting this is saying that 3 Americans were in Venezuela with other nationals from Spain. See, once you look at whatever goes on in Latin America, Spain always got to be involved. That's colonial bullshit. Spain think that Latin America are there. That's just like anything happening in ex-colonies of France, anything happening in ex-colonies of Britain. They all go over there. They think that's their children forever. It's like the United States treat us. Anything happen with us, stay away from our niggas. These are our niggas. Well, the rest of the world is reporting that those 3 U.S. citizens were trying to assassinate the president of Venezuela.
Es solo una muestra de lo decomisado de nuestro país. Venezuela, garante de la paz, el gobierno bolivariano en este país. Quiero englobar esta exposición en 3 aspectos. Fueron detenidos recientemente 2 ciudadanos españoles en Puerto Ayacucho. José María Basoa Badovinos y Andrés Martínez Adasme en Puerto Ayacucho. Ahí están. El otro detenido. Ahí está. En las cercanías del aeropuerto de...
The 2 Spanish citizens, they belong to the Spanish Secret Service. Come on, man. This is NATO. So we have NATO busted. We have NATO busted in Venezuela with 400 weapons of war to assassinate the president.
Puerto Ayacucho. Luego capturamos a un ciudadano estadounidense, Estrella David Estrella. Todo lo que sabemos es parte de la investigación. La CIA está al frente de esta operación. Y la otra, que tampoco nos extraña, pero ellos siempre han mantenido un bajo perfil sabiendo que la CIA opera en esta zona, que es el Centro Nacional de Inteligencia de España. Estos 2 capturados así los dicen, inclusive hablan ellos de un grupo de mercenarios que están buscando para traerlos a Venezuela con objetivos muy claros de asesinar al presidente Nicolás Maduro, a la vicepresidenta Delcy Rodríguez, a mi persona en este caso y otro grupo de...
Another 400,000 people coming and about 30,000 gang members will be kicked out of Venezuela for this. And they will be
de compañeros que son dirigentes de nuestro partido y de nuestra revolución. Origen, ingreso a Venezuela viene
Venezuela showing these weapons on TV, just so like, what the hell is America doing shipping these type of guns into Venezuela to commit crimes? You think that you will not reap what you sow?
Estados Unidos de Norteamérica. Viene desde Estados Unidos. Trabajo de inteligencia, de rastreo, hasta que tocamos el primer punto. Es solo una muestra de lo decomisado de nuestro país.
Okay.
Venezuela, garante de la paz, el gobierno.
When you try to destabilize a country like the Americans are doing in Venezuela, along with NATO, that's why you reap what you sow, like the good book. Somebody needs to take the good book down to Congress and ask them how they read it.
For that, Ashley, thank you. Also, here at 8 local men who are allegedly
when you send people
part of the notorious and violent Venezuelan gang that's been making national.
Then guess what? Your enemy will send people to your country to destabilize.
Headlines now behind bars.
And Aurora police are searching for 2 others. Fox 31's Matt Morrow here with the new information. Matt.
Well, Talia and Jeremy, take a look. Here they are.
Shame on the Democratic Party who came on TV and said there was no Venezuelan gang members taking over apartment complexes in Colorado till social media proved it was. Now, all of a sudden, damn, y'all found 10 gang members from Venezuela who trying to take over apartment complexes? See, we've been destabilized because of what the U.S. is doing.
And new today, Aurora police tell us all 10 here are members of Tren de Aragua, or TDA, and they are now charged with dozens of violent crimes, including kidnapping, child abuse, and attempted murder. We now know some of the they
are now charged with dozens of hardcore crimes that the Democrats swore up and down on TV wasn't happening. They said those were lies. Well, who the hell is these people? And why are they charged with dozens of crimes that the police and the prosecution was not going to charge them with until the social media outcry about this game? Now they force these they new voters, and then they training them over here, sending them back. See, cause a bunch of chaos, get you some good chaos understanding, and then take it back to Venezuela. That's crazy.
Venezuelan gang violence in Aurora started nearly a year ago. Here's a closer look at their mugshots. Again, police tell us all are documented members of TDA. Most of the men were arrested within the last few months. Some of the arrests go back to early this year. Again, the search is still on for 2 of them. Police would not tell us how many of the alleged gang members are in the U.S. illegally or have been turned over to ICE, Immigration and Customs Enforcement. But we know for sure at least one suspect is in ICE custody. Aurora police also tell us some of the gang members are behind the violence at the few apartment complexes here that have become the center of a national and international headlines and a talking point, as you heard, for the Trump-Vance campaign. This includes the Fitzsimmons Place apartments off Nome Street and the Whispering Pines condos on 13th Avenue. And Aurora police also tell us many of the victims of the violence committed by these men are migrants themselves. Jeremy? All right, man.
BS. Oh no, they're just committing violence against migrants. Liars. Stop lying. Oh, okay. All right, I'll play. We're gonna get back to the gang members. But see, once they get them over here, then this is what happened. They commit all the violence. Because the violence, that's extra. That's just extra. But this is the real goal of the Democrats right now.
Expect the oversight. Officials with the Oregon Department of Motor Vehicles just announced this weekend they have mistakenly registered more than 300 non-citizens to vote over the...
What? Oh, we accidentally registered 300 Venezuelans. It was an accident, an honest mistake. Liar. Our country on fire. You ain't mistakenly registered no goddamn illegal immigrants. That was on purpose, and it's way more than this is a 300,000. This is a drop in the bucket compared to what's really going on. But I just want to show y'all the Democrats swore up and down there was no illegals on voters' registrations. Liars.
The past 4 years. They described the registrations as a data entry issue, and officials adding that of the 306 who were mistakenly registered, just 2 have ever voted in any type of election.
Ooh, that you know of. So that's what you say. But you say some people voted that was illegals and that wasn't from America. They voted in our elections? Damn, that could swing an election. I thought when Trump said the election was rigged, people was unregistered immigrants, undocumented immigrants, illegals, they voted. That's a lie. Oh, you two would take down your video. Well, what the hell is this? This, like I just say, this is a drop in the bucket. They know it's way more. This is an organ. This is all over America. But this is they intentionally want to do this. This they new voting block.
News Nation's Nancy Liu joins me now with more on this story. So, Nancy, what happened here and what's the impact?
Well, Anna, state officials are emphasizing that what happened will not have an impact on the upcoming election, adding that mail ballots aren't going out for another month in Oregon. But as you might expect, the oversight has triggered widespread concern and outrage. It all came to light this week when the Oregon Transportation Department notified the DMV that 306 non-citizens had been mistakenly registered to vote since 2021. The problem stemmed from the state's automatic voter registration process, which is linked to whenever people apply for or renew their driver's license. But DMV staff failed to verify citizenship with proper documentation, or they entered information incorrectly. Democratic Congresswoman Andrea Salinas is blasting the agency in a statement saying, in part, this is total malpractice on the part of the DMV and is completely unacceptable. I am calling on the state to act quickly to remove these individuals from the polls, conduct a full and transparent investigation into how this occurred, and provide concrete steps they are taking to remedy this issue and prevent it from happening again. And Anna, that's just one official sounding in, and there are quite a few.
I can imagine. Has the loophole been fixed, and did any non-citizens actually vote?
Well, and according to Oregon's DMV administrator, the agency is moving swiftly to correct the issue, and the 306 people in question will be removed from voter rolls well before any ballots go out, unless they are actually U.S. citizens. She also states that initial analysis by the Oregon Secretary of State has identified that of the people on that list, 2 have voted. Importantly, this does not mean those individuals were not U.S. citizens at the time they voted, just that they failed to provide proof of citizenship to DMV. Now, Oregon Governor...
What type of scam is that? You don't even know if they said they didn't prove they were citizens. See, you didn't give a damn if they were citizens.
Tina Kochak weighed in on the mess, publicly claiming that the loophole will not impact the 2024 election. Federal law prohibits non-citizens from voting in national and local elections. But as you would imagine, the situation is new fuel for conspiracy theorists and election critics, including Elon Musk on social media.
Ma'am, it's not a conspiracy when you're running it on the news that non-citizens voted and that they were being registered at the DMV. It's not a conspiracy, ma'am, unless you're a conspiracy theorist. What the hell are you even saying this for?
Commentator claiming that the 2024 cheat has begun.
Yep.
Anna?
Thanks for watching, everybody. Yep. Go to join in.
That's just a little drop in the bucket. That's just a little bit of what was uncovered and dug up in Oregon. They lying about how many it was. Way more. Way more. All right. Let's I want that. Give me 1 second. All right. Let's get into the exposure of cackling Kamala, who is destroying her campaign daily.
Maybe you could answer the question most of America is asking outside the Democratic Party or Oprah Winfrey at the DNC. Who is Kamala Harris?
Luke Quinn.
She's a fraud.
In what respect?
She is an image that's been carefully crafted. You can start with what she is. She has a certain paint job, but that doesn't make her what she claims. And we have somebody that has a fabricated reality. I was just mentioning it a minute or two ago. She talks about she was that child on the bus integrating the schools. And if this was in California, I don't get it, because at that point I was a school teacher in LA, California, and we didn't have segregated schools. When she got in kindergarten, first, I was a playground director with the city school system. We didn't have segregated schools in the entirety of California. Both of my parents were school teachers. What they did is they shuffled the teachers around, but you went to school in your neighborhood. So I don't know where that study came in. So smoking dope in the dorm rooms, listening to Tupac. He was 11 years old when she was in the dorms, and when he cut his first single or release, he was 21, and she was a prosecutor in Alameda County, California. So
See, this is why we need different debates. Put Judge Joe, okay, obviously he wouldn't go up there. But we need somebody to do this type of stuff on stage for my grandmama to see. Why you don't convict your damn grandmama, nigga? I can't, brother. It's time for change. It's nothing I can do.
He gonna say that a long time. He gonna drag that one.
I know, that messed me up, bro. I looked at her and I said, Grandma, you just told me you agreed with the policies and you didn't like LGBTQ in schools. And you just sit here and told me all the stuff that you should vote for Trump. Why you should vote for Trump. And it's time for change.
Just say, Grandma, but what if she don't change nothing?
A lot of
Grandma, what if she don't change that? She's in office right now, Grandma. You see Joe ain't running, she running it, Grandma.
And they don't. But maybe
Joe said he's gonna cancel student loan. Grandma, he didn't do it.
Look, bro. You know, that's what I just think that it needs to be more people on the panel for the world to see, bro.
They do. They need to have. It needs to be even amount of
because this needs to be exposed, like just blatant lies. Trump's not gonna cover this. My grandma's never gonna find this out. No,
that's why they tapped in right now.
You know, hey, my grandma watches our videos.
Yeah.
I said, Grandma, you told me you agree with all of them. I said, do we be lying? She said, no, y'all be telling the complete truth.
Well,
it's time for change.
But you gotta understand, she been told this whole time. She been told her whole life. She been told her whole life.
When LBJ said I haven't voted Democrat for 100 years,
he was talking about my grandma.
All our grandmas will vote left.
And she was a prosecutor in Alameda County, California. So
that was a story.
Where do we go with somebody that will tell those things? Yes.
And that was a story she told to Charlamagne the
foundation.
So when she goes to Howard, she graduates, becomes a lawyer, and becomes a DA. Yeah, what kind of DA was she?
She was run of the mill. She got some advantages when it came to running. She had a boss that she clashed with in the end to run against him after she disappeared for a couple of years. Nobody quite knows when. So what happens between 1998 and 2004? What is she up to? How does she finance the run? Well, she's with Willie Brown, the mayor of San Francisco, who had been head of the Democratic Party caucus in Sacramento. And he got her a job when she was in her 20s, where she was supposed to nominally be working 15 hours a week, but actually it amounted to 1 or 2 appearances a month. And she was getting paid $72,000 a year for that. And then he ramped it up so she got more than $120,000 being on a medical advisory committee where most of the rest of the committee members were all 70 or above because they'd had a lifetime in the field of medicine, which she did not. So she got $120,000 a year to finance what became a campaign for attorney general in the San Francisco area.
Couple of things I want to bring up too in terms of her being tough on crime.
So Kamala was just we all thinking the same thing.
Yeah, she's
playing politics.
All right, bro.
She was playing politics. You never said nothing about that.
Hey, that's what you're playing.
That's what he
was. You was not getting that. You was not paying attention.
You giving a woman $70,000
denounce your work
to come to work once or twice a month?
They're playing politics.
Come on. In politics? That's what that was.
Yeah, Kamala.
All right, bro. Stop, bro. Stop, bro.
You went too far.
Yes,
you do it maybe a couple times. Okay, good. But keep on doing it. Sheesh.
No, that's literally what he was alluding to. And that's the guy that I said when I seen that story that I still haven't found again. That was on Twitter, on X, basically, of her with Willie. It was so many pictures of her just with Willie. And Willie's old, bro. She just had a dress on. She was just hanging with Willie all the time, bro. You know, that's what he alluding to. That's crazy. You know, hey, baby, we can put you on a good salary.
Couple of things I want to bring up too in terms of her being tough on crime, and we're going to look at that West Bank thing should be looked into. I hear that, but when you talk about being tough on crime, she proposed a bill in 2005 that essentially would allow you to be arrested 3 times before you actually went to jail. The police chief at that time pushed back on it and says, I can't buy. Heather Fong served as police chief until 2009, says proposal is ridiculous. So when she says she was tough on crime, tough on the border, it doesn't seem in many respects her record reflects that. Is that the what did you find, Judge?
That's like her being bused to school and her smoking dope in the dorm listening to Tupac. It's the fabrication. You put your finger up in there and see which way the wind's blowing, and that's what you try to do. Actually, her prosecutorial experience was an unmitigated disaster. I just interviewed a woman that was inappropriately caught up in that truancy thing for adults. A 9-year-old girl was caused to have a stroke, became paralyzed, and at 22 is still not fully recovered.
So, Judge, just tell everyone, because we're running out of time.
Years. Just
real quick, what everyone said it was, for example, if you cut school, they were actually pressing charges on parents. That was her idea to stop truancy.
Except in this case, the woman wasn't involved in that. The child was suffering from acute complications from sickle cell disease hospital. But Kamala Harris seeked some press on the woman to wait outside her home while she was expecting assistance, and it turned out to be an arrest. And the girl was caused to have a stroke. You know, this kind of thing is bad, and that's not what a prosecutor is supposed to be, because the prosecutor is supposed to deliver justice, which includes every now and then standing up and saying, Your Honor, in the interest of justice, the state wishes to dismiss these charges. And she never did that because she always played it to the camera.
And Judge, I've watched you could talk for hours on this, but just to summarize, the American people have gotten one interview with the vice president. We'll see one debate with the vice president. If she becomes president, says she hasn't forgotten her values. She hasn't changed. If she becomes president, what are her values? What kind of president will she be?
She's a fascist. You can see strength through joy. 90 years ago, last month, in Nazi Germany, they came up with a program, Strength Through Joy. And it was exactly the same as the one she's proposing. 90 years ago, same year, they came up with a bureau to suppress misinformation. Waltz and Harris have been pushing that. 90 years ago, 19...
Taj Jones. Speaking of that, there's a clip of Bernie Sanders on TV saying that she is not abandoning her policy. She's just saying what she needs to say to get elected. You should watch that.
Bernie said that?
Yeah, pull it up. Pull it up. Bernie, pull it up.
He did. He grilled her ass so bad. That's the thing, though. Trump can't grill her. He can, but he won't be able to grill her.
Yeah, he will.
He can.
I don't think he will.
I think he can hit her like the Hillary.
At this point in the election,
on policies,
it would not be a good. It would not be a good
on policies.
He could have grilled Hillary. That was white on white crime.
Yeah.
This one be white on black crime. We know how that goes.
He used to be talking crazy about
the white liberals.
Remember, he was like, "You gonna be in jail."
The white liberals gonna be sad, and the black people gonna be sad. That's white on black crime, brother.
You can't do that.
You can't. That's why I say you can't do that.
Well,
this is a black.
Hold on, y'all. We cannot look. Well, that's us looking at it like that. But if somebody's finna control our country, man, we should not care about how they feelings feel on the stage when our life is in stake.
That's how we think about it. That's not how everybody thinks about it. That's not how feelings. That's not how everybody thinks about it. The white liberals are gonna spin that, and the little sheep black people that follow what Mr. White liberals say are gonna fall in line with that narrative. Oh, you should feel this way because you're black. You're right. I should feel that way.
What if she hit the? Don't tell me. I'm finna have this black job.
You know us personally.
She might hit that.
You know us personally. We don't let people tell us what to feel. We don't let people tell us what to feel on this channel. You know, we think for ourselves and feel for ourselves. But you know, other people they don't move under that same logic.
She gonna say, "That's my black job, Donald Trump."
Oh yeah, and the crowd gonna clap. Yes, you ate that, sister. You ate that.
Trump said, "Hey, America, I can't do this."
Hold on. I'm gonna say, what's your plan to get jobs back to the black community on that note?
But that's the thing, though.
No. What are you gonna put?
Spicy collard greens and black dances.
I washed collard greens in the tub. I'm gonna help them niggas.
It's not gonna help that fact. What?
That's the problem. But people, I'm telling you, people who are thinking objectively, the swing voters who are sitting there and they really like with a notepad and a pen, you know, okay, what policy? They sit down and they listen to the debate.
The swing voters might be the key,
and they matter.
Yeah.
The people who vote for Trump are already going to vote for Trump. A lot of people who are going to vote for her are already going to vote for her.
That's true.
But them key swing voters, that's what we're going for here.
to start a small business. I'm supported by the former Vice President Dick Cheney, former Congress member Liz Cheney.
She gave her first solo interview to Brian Taff. Ever heard of him? We hadn't either. He's a local action news anchor for the local ABC station in Philly. And Kamala could not get it together.
When we talk about bringing down prices and making life more affordable for people, what are one or two specific things you have in mind for that?
Well, I'll start with this. I grew up a middle-class kid. My mother raised my sister and me. She worked very hard. She was able to finally save up enough money to buy our first house when I was a teenager. I grew up in a community of hardworking people, construction workers and nurses and teachers. And I try to explain to some people who may not have had the same experience, but a lot of people will relate to this. I grew up in a neighborhood of folks who were very proud of their lawn.
What? What are you talking about?
And I was raised to believe and to know that all people deserve dignity. And that we as Americans have a beautiful character. We have ambitions and aspirations and dreams, but not everyone necessarily has access to the resources that can help them fuel those dreams and ambitions. So when I talk about building an opportunity economy, it is very much with the mind of investing in the ambitions and aspirations and the incredible work ethic of the American people and creating opportunity for people, for example, to start a small business.
The question was, how are you going to bring down prices? And Kamala's answer was, I grew up around construction workers who took care of their lawns.
I want you to continue to notice as this campaign goes, there's something wrong with her. There's absolutely something wrong when she talks. I can't quite figure it out. But she gets the big gulp, like she's almost unsure of what to say. And it's visible. You can basically see her body go into a contortion. Yeah. Okay, let me spit this one out. It's very weird. It's very weird. I'm not making fun of her. I'm not making light. I'm showing you guys that there's something just not quite right. Don't know what it is. But let's continue. So now she decides to do an interview. It looks to be an off-the-cuff interview, like she's basically just handling this guy's questions. And it's from an ABC affiliate, probably somewhere outside of Johnstown or wherever she was. And you remember the debate. You looked at the debate, you see a woman who is well coiffed. Her hair was perfect. Great wig that night. Her makeup was perfect. And she just looked like a princess out on the debate stage. She obviously didn't have the Hollywood makeup people when she did this interview. And she had her hair, the different hairpiece on, and she's looking kind of haggard. So let's listen into how this went.
Because people only there.
Pleasure to meet you. Thank you for coming today. Our audience.
What happened was, since she got busted wearing that earpiece, we're gonna look back into that in a little bit. She got busted wearing that earpiece, so they're like, "Fuck it, you got to go out there and do it without the earpiece." And this is what she liked, when nobody can tell her what to say, nobody can give her pre-written campaign speeches, and this is her trying to think on her feet. This is why they can never let her go into a debate thinking on her feet, because she get nervous. She just looks crazy, cackles.
Of course.
As you know, we're sitting here in a state and arguably in front of an audience that 54 days from now could decide the outcome of this presidential election. Yeah. You hear it more than I do. People want to know more about you and about your specific plans. At the debate the other night, you talked about creating an opportunity economy. I wonder if we can drill down on that a little bit. When we talk about bringing down prices and making life more affordable for people, what are one or two specific things you have in mind for that?
All right. I'm going to stop when he says the question, because I'm going to remind you what the question is. And then you can
something easy. This, like, as a kid, your dad or your uncle or a family friend or somebody sitting in front of you with a baseball, like, all right, I'm finna toss it to you now. I'm gonna toss it to you real slow. And you, as a kid, you know you're gonna hit that home run because they're gonna put it right over the plate. And so they put over that plate, you whack, home run as a kid. Yay! Now, that's what the reporter did. Gave her a nice little softball. Well, give me 1 or 2 little answers to how you're gonna hit it. Nice and soft. Let's see how she handles that.
Can listen and tell me if she answers the question. So you talk all about this opportunity economy. What are a few things you're actually going to do to lower prices? Tell us.
Well, I'll start with this. I grew up a middle-class kid. My mother raised my sister and me. She worked very hard.
Does that sound familiar? It's the exact same answer and speech that she gave at the debate. The exact same answer. She couldn't come up with a simple, dude, what are you going to do? Well, I was a middle-class kid, but I'll continue.
She was able to finally save up enough money to buy our first house when I was a teenager. I grew up in a community of hardworking people, construction workers and nurses and teachers. And I try to explain to some people who may not have had the same experience, if a lot of people will relate to this. I grew up in a neighborhood of folks who were very proud of their lawn.
He said, give us 1 or 2 examples of how you're going to help the people. And she can't, oh, damn, I don't have no examples. Firemen, firefighters, police, nurses, doctors, preachers, soccer moms. They all stayed next door to me. What a joke.
And I was raised to believe and to know that all people deserve dignity.
This is what happens when there's no teleprompter and maybe no earpiece. She's completely stuck. She's trying to recall.
All people deserve dignity. What the hell are you talking about, ma'am? What did we actually give them? This is a friend, this reporter. This isn't that ain't Fox News with a got you question. Ma'am, give us 2 things you're going to do for the people. And this, she can't remember. She can't wear her earpieces because she got busted. So this is the real Kamala Harris that everybody been talking about.
Recall the answers that these people told her it say. Whereas if you actually believed it, you would already know the answer. But she's, okay, what do I say here?
And that we as Americans have a beautiful character. We have ambitions and aspirations and dreams, but not everyone necessarily has access to the resources that can help them fuel those dreams and ambitions. So when I talk about building an opportunity economy, it is very much with the mind of investing in the ambitions and aspirations and the incredible work ethic of the American people and creating opportunity for people, for example, to start a small business.
Big swallow.
My mother, worked long hours, and our neighbor helped raise us. We used to call her, I still call her our second mother. She was a small business owner. I love our small business owners. I learned who they are from my childhood, and she was
what small business owner does she know that wants to pay 40% unrealized capital gains tax?
And she's just a scammer. The middle America, the small business, the mom and pops. It's word salad that campaigns work on to make you try to seem relatable to the people. That's what she's trying to do. And she won't answer the question because she don't know. She has no idea what the hell she can do. She know in her heart, I don't know how to make, I'm just acting. This is just another role for me to make some money. I don't know how to make Americans, their lives better. She's not no business person who done created no goddamn jobs. She don't know how to help nobody else but her goddamn self. That's the truth.
In her entire life, since she loves small business owners, please tell me where these small business owners that want to pay, 50, 60, 70% income tax. Love to know.
A community leader, she hired locally, she mentored. Our small businesses are so much a part of the fabric of our communities, not to mention, really, I think the backbone of America's economy. So my opportunity economy plan includes giving startups a $50,000 tax deduction to start their small business. It used to be $5,000. Nobody can start a small business with $5,000. But investing in people's innovative ideas and giving them the ability to go for it. Opportunity economy means, look, we don't have enough housing in America.
Does she realize that you can't earn a tax credit for, till you actually file your taxes? There's nobody who's going to be able to start a business. Go, okay, so I've got $50,000 coming for the government. Mr. Landlord, I want to lease this property. Will you lease it to me? I'm going to pay you back when Kamala gives me that tax credit. Well, you don't get a tax credit unless you're deducting it. It comes off of the revenue that you have to make beforehand. You're not giving anybody anything.
Housing supply shortage. And what that means, in particular for so many younger Americans, the American dream is elusive. It's just actually not attainable. So part of my plan is to work with the private sector and housing developers to give them a tax credit, or to be able
tax credit. Understand? That's
this is a scammer. This is a scam, and she wrong. And if it wasn't for this brother and intelligent individuals like y'all to understand this, regular people, poor people, oh yeah, 50. Oh, woo, does Kamala gonna give us 50,000 a piece to start our business? No, she not. Are you crazy? No, you gotta already be moving and grooving and shaking and making. They know who not doing that. That's a scam, and it's a hustle, and shame on her for making the people think she finna hand out some checks to poor people.
After you've generated revenue, you don't pay taxes unless you've generated revenue.
Partner with us as the government to build, and my goal is 3 million new homes by the end of my first term. In addition, to help people who just want to get their foot in the door, literally. And so giving first-time home buyers a $25,000 down payment assistance to be able to just get in the door, and then they will do the work that they need to do.
I've already showed several economists, several white individuals who know about money movers and shakers say she wrong for saying that. That 20, what is that? She said, and they say she could have came out and said, I'm gonna give Black Americans $300 and something thousand a piece to get them a home, and it would have been better. They said that. They said that. So what the hell is she talking about? She's not doing nothing for this. Is another finesse and another scam that she's pulling on people. She's not going to help nobody get no goddamn home.
To save and to pay that mortgage and to build wealth for themselves and their family. These are some examples of what I mean when I talk about an opportunity economy, and a lot of it has to do with just the community I was raised in and the people that I admired who work hard, and deserve to have, their dreams fulfilled because they're prepared to work for it.
Okay, so she went on for a number of minutes there, talked about her family, her friends, and how she was brought up. And I was like, I asked you how you're going to lower prices. What are you going to do to lower prices, cost? What are you doing? I'm gonna the flowery unicorn. We're gonna have this great thing where people are gonna be able to buy houses with a $25,000 down payment. Good luck. It's not ever gonna happen. She had a perfect opportunity. She could have said, "We're gonna if you ask Trump that, I know what the answer is. We're gonna start drilling right now and get the pumps cheaper right off the bat." What that's going to do is allow trucks to get on the road and start, not having to have the cost of the gas or diesel so high. So if the cost for moving goods is cheaper, then you can lower your prices. People are going to be able to work on farms and do different things, blah, 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 blah. What the hell was she talking about? Yeah, we're going to, tax credit. I don't even think she knows what a tax credit is. I worked in entrepreneurial.
Just came on and said another great thing that's really will help Americans, all Americans, if you're working and doing things. He just said he's gonna push no taxation, no taxes on overtime for y'all out there who busting y'all butt. That's great. You definitely know that's going in your pocket, But things like that, she don't have no idea. She gonna steal that real motherfucker soon.
Zones, what they call them, opportunity zones in Florida, where you could buy a property and you would have reduced taxes and tax credits. I know exactly what they are. You go ahead and build here, And at the end of the year, if you're renovating a house, whatever, at the end of that, when you sell it or later on when you file your taxes, then you can get a tax credit because you bought the property, you've renovated the property, you're either keeping it as a rental or you're selling it, but in any event, you've made money. Now, instead of owing the government 30, 40, 50%, we're going to give you $50,000 credit so you don't have to pay us that kind of money. That's 12 months from now. She doesn't know what she's talking about.
Yeah, she
has no idea.
Trying to at the debate and at previous appearances about turning the page on the past. In fact, here today in Johnstown, you're talking about a new way forward.
Over the top.
I think some people have a question, given maybe your current role as Vice President of the United States, how different you are from Joe Biden. And so I wonder if there are one or two spots, policy areas or approaches where you would say, I'm a different person.
What a stupid question. I'm a woman, I think. I squat to pee. What do you mean, how is she different? What he's trying to get her right now to do is distance herself from Joe. Here's how I'm different. Which means for the last 3.5 years, you must have been a chameleon because whatever her answer is here, you know coming, it's going to be BS. So let's hear.
Well, I'm obviously not Joe Biden. And, you know, I offer a new generation of leadership. And so, for example, thinking about developing and creating an opportunity economy where...
She's right back to the answer that she gave in question number 1. Let me just go ahead and revert back to the other question. But you already answered it. We already heard this opportunity economy crap.
It's about investing in areas that really need a lot of work.
I swear I just didn't replay the same thing. She's saying the exact same thing. By the way, the government, not that she understands, the government can't invest in anything. Government doesn't have any money. They take it from us.
And maybe focusing on, again, the aspirations and the dreams, but also just recognizing that at this moment in time, some of the stuff we could take for granted years ago, we can't take for granted anymore. For example,
whose fault is that?
Another plan that I have that is a new approach is to expand the child tax credit to $6,000 for young families.
She just said that. She just said that in the answer to question number 1. She's just repeating herself.
The first year of their child's life, because that is obviously a very critical stage of development of a child. And a lot of young parents need the help to buy a car seat or a crib.
She literally just, I swear to God, I did not cut and paste this. She is giving the exact same answer to the next question. Word for word, tax credit, buy a child seat. She's saying the exact same thing. And I'm like, there's no way. There's no way I'm watching this. This person is a presidential candidate and can't even answer the most simple of questions.
Or clothes for their kids. And so my
big swallow
approach is about new ideas, new policies that are directed at the current moment. And also, to be very honest with you, my focus...
Well, you weren't honest before. Right.
...is very much in what we need to do over the next 10, 20 years to catch up to the 21st century around, again, capacity, but also challenges.
Joe Biden's child tax credit is $3,000 and Kamala's is $6,000. Of all the things, border, inflation, crime, Israel, housing, the only difference between Kamala and Joe Biden is a $3,000 difference in the child tax credit.
This guy's nodding his head and he's probably thinking, this is one ignorant, you know what? She has no clue what she's talking about. Why did you people have me go out and talk to her?
What did she just say? How are you different than Joe Biden? The entire goal of her campaign is to separate herself from Joe Biden. The campaign slogan is a new way forward. It's a new way forward from Joe Biden. So how exactly are you a new way forward? She couldn't answer.
Crime and public safety are two major issues right at the forefront of voters' minds. In Philadelphia as well, where crime is a significant issue. When we talk about crime, the conversation turns to gun safety as well. And I think you actually probably caught a lot of people off guard, maybe a bit by surprise in the debate the other night when you mentioned that you are a gun owner. I know you said it in 2019 as well. I want to talk about your values on this issue. When it comes to gun ownership, where do you draw the line in America on gun ownership and gun use?
I'm sorry. What do you mean, where does she draw the line?
No.
She does.
No, he should have stopped at when he said, when it comes to crime, the majority topic is gun safety. What? That's a damn lie. It's the criminal. We're talking about the criminals. See, but that's a talking point. When they talking about all this crime going on, they say, yeah, we got to ban assault rifles. Man, please. That's nonsense.
Doesn't have the capacity to draw the line. It's not up to her to, quote, draw the line. This is something specifically that is in this little thing. I know they don't like it.
It's disgusting. She got the nerve to say, me and my husband are gun owners. But this is real talk. They do not preach for us to defend ourselves. If right now you're going to campaign for blacks to arm themselves, teach gun safety and training awareness, they will shun that. They will look at us like, oh, wait a minute, what are y'all saying? Because they don't want us to have weapons. But here she go brag her and her small-head husband, oh, they got plenty of weapons. But they don't want you. I swear, when have you ever heard any preachers or anybody talking about training courses for firearms for the youth? So the youth to learn they don't have to carry illegal firearms. They could be legal firearms carriers. They don't talk about that. But now because she's trying to gain sway with the those who have legal firearms and will never give them up. It's just disgusting, man. What's she doing? She a comedian. She's saying
this thing called the Constitution. It is not up to her to, quote, draw the line.
Well, like you said, Brian, I am a gun owner, and Tim Walz, my running mate, is also a gun owner. We're not taking anybody's guns away. I support the Second Amendment, and I support reasonable gun safety laws. Part of my approach to this is
nobody in the Congressional Black Caucus. You show me one Congressional Black Caucus member teaching black folks about the Second Amendment. You can't tell me that because I've been around them civil rights people. I know they never. They only thing they teach us is to vote. They to vote, get out and vote. And that's how they just want your vote. They want you to get the hell out their face. They just want your signature on their policies. But you talk to them people about the Second Amendment, how we're gonna need that. They're gonna look at you like they're gonna say you too radical. But then all of a sudden, here she go. This the head of their party who running for president bragging about their weapons, her and her running mate. They got what? Could have fooled me.
I was a career prosecutor for most of my career. I have personally prosecuted homicide cases. I have personally looked at autopsies. I have personally seen what assault weapons do to the human body. And so I feel very strongly that it is consistent with the Second Amendment and your right to own a gun to also say we need an assault weapons ban.
That she's making that line, creating that line. It's something that, she's going to just say, we're going to have an assault weapons ban. Okay.
Literally tools of war. They were literally designed to kill a lot of human beings quickly.
You should send her to, Iran or someplace with an AR-15 and see how functional that rifle is as a, quote, tool of war. See how that works out. I don't think she understands the difference between an automatic, a semi-automatic. She has no clue.
I say we need universal background checks. The majority of NRA members support that. Why? Because it's just reasonable. You just might want to know before someone can buy.
Universal background checks on weapons, but not at our voting polls. To universal background check at the polls is racist. See how they do that? Let's background check who voting. And the Democrats get pissed when you say that.
By a lethal weapon if they've been found by a court to be a danger to themselves or others.
I don't know. Any of you guys ever see that in the Second Amendment? I'm pretty sure that that's not in there. So I don't care what you think, Kamala. I don't care what you feel. And now you know for sure you shouldn't care what she said when she says she's not coming for it. She just said, I'm coming for it. no, I'm a gun owner too. I'm not coming for your guns, except I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that to make sure that, you don't get it.
You just might want to know.
2 final questions, if I might.
Sure.
On the appeal of the man you were running against, as you drove here today, you likely saw a lot of Trump signs.
Yeah, that's another thing. My wife's got friends up in Pennsylvania, especially Western Pennsylvania. All you see is Trump signs. But the media tells us she's ahead.
He has an historic appeal in this country. And as you are someone running against him and trying to understand that, I wonder how you distill it. What do you understand his appeal to be? And how do you speak to his voters, or maybe people who just share his values but are open to something else?
It's going to be hard for her to answer because she doesn't care what we think. This is a perfect opportunity he set her up well. What do you want to do to appeal to Trump voters?
Based on experience.
She absolutely do know how to appeal to Trump. Some of the extreme Trump voters who want a lot. We know it's racist deep in the Republican Party, like it's in the Democratic Party. She know how to appeal to him. She already appealed to him. She was just locking blacks up and people up for small crimes. She know how to appeal to him when you say you're gonna keep the slave labor high in prison, but she don't want to say that right now because that's gonna piss off. That's gonna fuck up her communist, Marxist, socialist scam that she running to get on a Democratic ticket. See, it's a catch-22 for her. She know how to appeal when she wants to.
And a lived experience. No. In my heart, I know. In my soul, I know that the vast majority of us as Americans have so much more in common than what separates us. And I also believe that I am accurate in knowing that most Americans want a leader who brings us together as Americans and not someone who professes to be a leader who is trying to have us point our fingers at each other.
So you want to basically eviscerate the Second Amendment. You want to bring in tons and tons and millions of newcomers. You want to make sure that people can do whatever they want with a baby at any time that they basically want. You want to tax us into oblivion. You want to put price controls on food. I'm pretty sure there's a lot more that divides us than that brings us together. It's the opposite of what you're saying. Completely opposite. None of us want to have anything to do with the crap that this woman is saying.
I think people are exhausted with that approach, to be honest with you. I think people want a leader who has...
So you know what this tells me, and it probably tells you? She's never even sat down with Trump voters. She's never even taken the time to say, you know what? Let me find out what some of these people actually think. What drives them? What makes them tick? Because if she did, she couldn't possibly have just said what she has said in this interview. This interview is the divisiveness that she's trying to avoid.
Common sense and tries to find common ground. I'm supported by over 200 Republicans who worked for both Presidents Bush, John McCain, Mitt Romney.
200? Wow. That's incredible. Out of like maybe, 80, 90 million, you're supported by 200 Republicans? Oh my God, we're quaking.
I'm supported by the former Vice President Dick Cheney, former Congress member Liz Cheney.
You mean the person who got bounced out of her position, lost by like 30 or 40 points because the people in her own state said, nah, we don't want you. And you're touting that? You're actually wearing that as a badge of honor that Dick Cheney and Liz Cheney are behind you? You have no idea. You have never, ever, ever, ever sat down and talked to anybody who's a Trump supporter.
And I think people are more willing now, in light of the hate and division that we see coming out of Donald Trump, to say, hey, let's put country first.
Has she not played a tape of her own rally and the stuff that she says? Has she never watched MSNBC? Has she never turned on CNN and watched Jim Acosta? Has she not watched Morning Joe? Can this woman be more obtuse than she is? And
I think that just makes us stronger and more healthy as a country, to say, look, we can all debate our differences around, various policies, but let's stop with the division. Like, enough of that. Let's bring everybody together.
And finally, as you introduce yourself to America in a new way, they've heard much of your story at the Democratic National Convention in that debate earlier this week. If there's one thing that you wish Americans knew about who Kamala Harris is that you don't think they know yet, what would that be?
I don't know. I mean, probably it's not very different from anybody watching.
Whip out some hot sauce, like Hillary. She gonna talk like ain't no way tired. What do we need to know something about you? And she's like, I don't know.
Right now, I love my family.
Oh, that's great.
One of my favorite things that I lately have not been able to do is Sunday family dinner. I love to cook. I have incredible friends. My best friend from kindergarten is still my best friend. I think that, I have a career that really, and I said it the other day, as a career prosecutor, I never asked a victim of crime, were they a Republican or a Democrat. The only thing I ever asked them is, are you okay? And I think that's the approach that most Americans want, regardless of who they voted for in the last election, in terms of turning the page and charting the way forward.
I can't take anymore. This woman can't help but lie. She wants her own words. Oh no, I don't want to take away anyone's guns, but what I want to do is make it as hard as possible for you to use it and own it. Universal background checks, and we're going to check, and we're going to determine whether or not you have anything in the background that's going to, stop you from being able to own a weapon. We're going to do an assault weapons ban. We're going to take away your AR-15 because it shouldn't be in your hands. Man.
And let me just say about Joe Biden, I have. Hello to all my divine nine brothers and sisters, and my soror, and to all my HBCU brothers and sisters.
Okay. Kamala Harris brings out her new accent once again, and this time it was at the Congressional Black Caucus Foundation 2024 Phoenix Awards dinner in Washington, D.C. Yeah, or should I say the Coonan Black Caucus. Well, here she go once again in a crowded room full of majority of Black people. Majority of her Divine Nine rally. You hear the skiing all in the background. And of course, she had to acknowledge her sorority because these are basically her main number one supporters when it comes to Black people, Black Americans, sororities, fraternities, and Black women. And then she has the liberal white women and men and LGBTQ community and the illegals. That is her support base, which is not going to get her to the White House. However, she was at the Congressional Black Caucus Foundation dinner, and I want to talk a little bit about it. Just briefly. So, at this dinner, she outlined her so-called vision for hard work. She says the Congressional Black Caucus has served as the conscience of the Congress of our nation. And as a proud former CBC member, I know America relies on the leaders in this room, not only for a conscience, but for a vision. Harris said in a 9-minute address before lawmakers, congressional staff, and activists. Let me just say this. The CBC has done nothing for Black people since the Civil Rights Act. That is a fact. They've done everything for all America. And if that's the case, why do we have a Congressional Black Caucus? It is a voting bloc in Congress. The Congressional Black Caucus, I believe, has 200 members. It's over 100, but it's a voting bloc. But they refuse to create policies specifically for Black Americans. They support and vote on policies for Ukraine, for Israel, LGBTQAI+, for Asian Americans, and for the illegals. Nothing specifically for Black Americans. So now we have Kamala Harris, Vice President Kamala Harris, giving a 9-minute speech at the CBC Foundation with a fake accent in front of a fake caucus, giving their fake support for Black America. And this is what I want to say to all of my Black American voters. Stop giving your vote to fake kinfolk. Not only has a Congressional Black Caucus not done anything specifically for Black Americans, you had this Vice President, Kamala Harris, who's running for president with her fake accent, said that she would never do anything specifically for Black Americans.
So I'm not going to sit here and say I'm going to do something that's only going to benefit Black people. No.
And she kept her word. So again, here we have a room full of wealthy, elitist grifters benefiting off the backs of Black Americans. But part of that fault lies with us, Black Americans, because we continue to vote these same people into office, like the Clyburn, Hakeem Jeffries, the Cory Booker. We continue to vote these same politicians in office every year. They are already backed by powerful, wealthy white people or organizations, but they still need our vote. Stop giving it to them, because we get nothing in return. Skin folk ain't necessarily kinfolk. We have no friends. Thank you, guys.
Hop on this Trump-Kamala debate. You are not going to want to miss this.
A lot of people thought when they saw the behavior of ABC News on Tuesday night during the mob attack on President Trump, the unethical, sickening, and grotesque journalistic malpractice, which really added up to a 3-on-1 assassination attempt journalistically of President Trump. Kamala didn't have to do anything, and the pre-rehearsed, pre-scripted answers for Kamala Harris made everyone really scratch their heads. The reactions, the sniping, the snipping, the fact-checking. But there's this one moment I can't get out of the back of my eyelids. It's right here.
You lost the 2020 election. You repeatedly falsely claimed that you won, many times saying you won in a landslide. In the past couple of weeks leading up to this debate, you have said, quote, you lost by a whisker, that you, quote, didn't quite make it, that you came up a little bit short.
I said that?
Are you now acknowledging that you lost in 2020?
No, I don't acknowledge that at all.
But
I
you
said
did
that
say
sarcastically.
But
You know that. It was said, oh, we lost by a whisker. That was said sarcastically. Look, this.
So Donald Trump says, I said that sarcastically, and he jumps into defending his campaign in 2020, defending his historic margins that he got, and talking about why he had every right under the Constitution.
Bottom line, the 2020 election was handled improperly. It should have been sent to the state legislatures. That goes back to the Constitution. So the fact that they're trying to paint Trump as some conspiracy nut job for even insinuating that that should have been followed is what's wrong with the media and politics. You can't just rewrite the rules to whatever fits your side and narrative. That's not the way this works. And I mean, anybody who saw the Trump whiskers comment knew for a fact that he was being sarcastic. Everyone knows his sense of humor by now.
Do elections and govern elections here in this country. So Trump says, but you've heard that before from Trump on the campaign trail. Okay, that was not shocking or groundbreaking. The president's been saying that for the better part of 4 years. What was shocking was when Trump said, I lost by a whisker. This is just me being sarcastic. David Muir, the news broadcaster,
I didn't detect the sarcasm. Lost by a whisker. We didn't quite make it.
To come into our country.
What? I did watch all of these pieces of video. I didn't detect the sarcasm. Lost by a whisker. We didn't quite make it. And we should just point out here as clarification, and you know this, you and your allies, 60 cases.
This isn't about you. You jackass. This isn't about you. You propagandizing piece of garbage. This isn't about you. You absolute and total shill. This is the thing I cannot get this interaction out of my head. That David Muir, all the fact checks and everything, that's bad enough. Okay, they didn't fact check Kamala Harris once. They fact checked Donald Trump. They fact checked Donald Trump on like 7 different things at least. Kamala Harris told 25 lies that can be recorded in this debate. But they are literally fact checking Donald Trump's sarcasm during his comments. They're saying, oh, I fact checked you to not be sarcastic when you said that. They're like diving deep into his soul and saying that they are the arbiters of what Donald Trump thinks and is saying. Oh, man. You know, it makes you think. It really makes you think. And the more you watch this, the more you watch the Kamala reactions and the Kamala answers, more importantly, to these questions and how performative and prescriptive they are, because we all see what happens when Kamala Harris doesn't have a script and she doesn't have something to follow, like an actual script and an agenda to follow. It's a real head scratcher. Like it really does. The being in the tank, it begins to like make even the most honest people watching this debate say, man, like this thing seems like it was totally rigged from the inside.
Something that makes me happy, after this debate, ABC lost over $25 million in ad revenue, and rightfully so, because they knew exactly what they were doing from the start. They wanted Donald Trump to look like a fool. ABC is not by any means neutral or moderate. They want Kamala to be the president. That's well known. That's a secret that nobody seems to address. They are owned by Disney. You think Disney, one of the most woke corporations on the planet, wants Donald Trump as president? Absolutely not. This was orchestrated from the very beginning to make Donald Trump look like a fool, and they're paying with their pocketbooks because $25 million worth of ad revenue out of their pockets. That's how we defeat these people.
Maybe right. Check this out. This is what's breaking across my feed right now. An ABC whistleblower is set to expose a rigged debate revealing 2 claims. Harris' campaign received sample questions that were identical to the ones being asked in the debate. That there was a promise that Donald Trump would be fact-checked and that Kamala Harris would not face any scrutiny, as you just saw in that clip. Donald Trump would be fact-checked. Even his emotional intentions of comments will be fact-checked. I don't think you were sarcastic enough. This is why Kamala Harris had such swagger and confidence wobbling into that debate. The whistleblower also points to several other elements designed to give Harris a significant edge in the debate. I wonder if we'll have any revelations about the use of secret communication device. Okay. So where's this coming from? The best that we could do is we could track down this post right here, this tweet right here. I'll be releasing an affidavit from ABC News regarding the debate. I've signed a non-disclosure agreement with an attorney and whistleblower. The affidavit states that the Harris campaign was given sample questions, which were essentially the same questions that were given in the debate. Fact-checking Donald Trump would not be fact-checked. According to the affidavit, states several other factors were built in to give Kamala an advantage. I will release the full affidavit. I'll be releasing it before the weekend is out. This account, obviously a Trump supporting account. Black insurrectionist is what it's called. I have not heard of this person. I do not know who this person is. But these are the claims. These claims are being picked up pretty widely. ABC whistleblower alleges that affidavit that the Harris campaign was given sample questions and that Trump would be fact-checked. This is Jason Miller, Trump's senior advisor, saying, what the F is this? We also saw Kamala Harris perfectly recite answers during the debate, like she knew exactly what she was going to be asked. The head of ABC News set her up with her husband. Two of ABC anchors attacked Trump all night and cut him off. Remember when Donald Trump brought up the fact that he was shot and the anchor said, we don't have time to talk about that, and moved on? Remember the anchors didn't even apologize to Donald Trump that he got shot? Meaning, like, they didn't even say, we're glad you're okay. What does that mean? Incredible. Turns out to be true. This is a serious breach of journalistic ethics and will be the death blow to ABC News, says, well, Bill Ackman, one of the richest guys on earth, billionaire. All of this leads to President Trump making the announcement that he will not be doing another debate. There will be no third debate. Kamala Harris campaign releases a memo touting the gains in targeted states. So President Trump has said he will not debate again Kamala Harris.
I mean, what lengths do you have to go to actually get a neutral debate? Who's truly neutral in 2024? Everyone's going to have some bias one way or the other. But I think the most fair person you can have is Megyn Kelly. I think she would stick it to both sides. I think she would be a fine moderator. But in regards to Trump saying that he's not going to debate again, I don't know if I fully believe him saying that. Yes, his poll numbers probably will go up post that debate. I think it's a bargaining chip so we can have more favorable conditions for the third and final debate. But that's just me. What do you guys think?
I want a rematch. Polls clearly show that I won the debate against a communist Kamala Harris, a Democrat radical left candidate. Tuesday night, she immediately called for a second debate. She and crooked Joe Biden have destroyed the country, millions of criminals and deranged people pouring in, unchecked. Everyone knows this. All the other problems caused by Kamala and Joe. She was a no-show at the Fox debate. She refused to do NBC or CBS. Kamala should focus on what she's done during the last 4-year period. There will be no third debate. There will be no third debate. As the Trump team is sharing right now. Donald Trump just posted this saying there will be no third debate. Why debate? The numbers for Trump look good. The debate is obviously an opportunity for Kamala Harris to frame herself as someone who can, well, recite pre-scripted answers, which is exactly what this sounded like. So I had during the debate, I had, and these are just the most recent Pew Research released figures showing he's up 82% to 16% with evangelicals. Well, white evangelicals, that's the vast majority of the nation. Get out the vote programs, full effect. The number is incredibly impressive and is historic, actually. Trump's unique and special bond to the religious communities. I want to talk to you about something really quickly, and I wonder if you had the same experience. I called a member of my family who's not that political, but was passively watching the debate, and they said that Kamala Harris, and I can't get this out of my mind, Kamala Harris behaved like an actress, reciting lines. That she just kind of like knew her prompts, and she was like ready to recite a line. That it was performative, and it was like completely pre-scripted. It was almost like Donald Trump was being shackled down and Kamala was given all of the room to run. Now, in spite of this, Donald Trump has been on ABC News's social media. Donald Trump's been absolutely destroying Kamala Harris. And many people have been destroying Kamala Harris after the fact. Obviously, the fact checks that happened during the debate or didn't happen during the debate is journalistic now. It's a crime. It's a crime. This was what the debate was a crime.
Going into the debate, I expected Donald Trump to be on his back foot because he had everything stacked against him. The moderators, the network, the questions, everything. Everything was against this man. Yet he still beat Kamala in the debate. How is that possible? Because his policy wins. Policy wins elections, not personalities. No matter how hard they try and tell you, oh, Kamala is such a nice and likable person. She's got such a nice laugh. Don't fall for that BS. Vote for the person who's going to make your life better. And that's Donald Trump.
more Democrat throughout the years, but she was asked twice, right, during the debate and this interview she had on ABC. And twice they asked her how she was going to make American lives better. She didn't have an answer. She talked about how she grew up. What are you going to do to help us? 3 weeks ago, Trump comes out with the no tax on tips. That's going to help people that are waiters, waitresses, bartenders. A few days ago, he comes out with no tax on overtime. That is huge.
We have a major update that signals disaster for Kamala Harris. We're talking about a post-debate polling that shows that she's in trouble. Now, the most important thing to pay attention to in this video that we're going to focus on is how policy is winning this election up to this point. And to give you guys a few examples before we get into the polls, let's understand the backstory. Watch.
Survey from the Council of American Islamic Relations found that 40% of Michigan's Muslim American voting population plan to back Green Party candidate Jill Stein. 18% plan to support President Trump. 12% want VP Harris, and 4% plan to vote for Cornel West. This seems pretty significant, Kyle, specifically after more than 100,000 voters in Michigan in the primary voted uncommitted. Is this a massive red flag for the Harris campaign, given that there's only about 7 weeks until Election Day?
It is, and for a couple reasons. I mean, think about the mainstream coverage of Donald Trump and Muslims. It is 100% negative. And so the fact that this poll shows, and it's a CARE poll, which, you know, CARE does not like Donald Trump. But the fact that this poll shows that more Michigan Muslims support Donald Trump than supports Kamala Harris is, I mean, that is major. But then when you look at the top line of the poll, and it shows that 40% of Michigan Muslims support Jill Stein, to me, that is major red flags for Harris. And there's been a lot of coverage about the fact that is RFK going Jill Stein. To me, that is major red flags for Harris. And there's been a lot of coverage about the fact that is RFK going to be on the ballot? Is he not going to be on the ballot in Michigan? Cornel West, as RFK was put back on the ballot, Cornel West was also put on the ballot, and so he theoretically is going to take votes away from Kamala Harris. But she has a major problem with Michigan Muslims because they don't like what Biden has done, and she, of course, has, in their opinion, has not been outspoken enough. And so this is a very significant problem for her because there are hundreds of thousands of Muslims who are very paying attention to what is going on. And so I think what we'll see is that this is going to get worse if it ever gets better.
Now, let's just look at the numbers. So in the present moment, when we look at the different swing states, Muslim voters are favoring Jill Stein, right? Because her whole campaign, like at the top of the list, is a ceasefire immediately. Okay. And then you see in Michigan that Kamala Harris is only at 12%. So this is a problem. This is a huge issue for her campaign. This is why you saw recently that right after the debate, a poll dropped in favor of Donald Trump +1. And that was the poll called Insider Advantage that has Trump up by 1. This is an issue. And why is that? Because if we look at what happened in 2020, during this time, you'll see the biggest difference between Joe Biden and Kamala Harris as it pertains to their performance. Take a look at this. So this poll was dated September 18, 2020, and they did all of the swing states. And if we look at Michigan, Donald Trump was at 39%. Joe Biden was at 49%. Currently, Donald Trump is up +1. Even if you don't go with that, he's at least tied in that state. So a 10% difference between Joe Biden and Donald Trump, no difference between Kamala Harris and Donald Trump. She's in big trouble in Michigan. And it comes down to those two big issues for voters. Obviously, number one, they have the largest Muslim population. They don't agree with Joe Biden or Kamala Harris as pertains to how they've handled the Hamas and Israel war. And then throw on top of that the economic factor where inflation has wrecked their ability to live the life that they want to live financially. So when you take all these things into consideration, she's not doing good in Michigan. This is a huge, huge problem. So that's why you can't get caught up in the emotional reaction from the corporate media as it pertains to the debate. You need to look at the numbers, because that is what matters more than how these people who have Trump derangement syndrome feel about Trump. And so this takes us to the newest poll that actually dropped today that is singing the same song. So this is a national poll from Atlas Intel, which, according to the polling experts, is one of the most accurate pollsters out there. News some attention because it's to be taken seriously. Donald Trump is up 50.9% nationally. Nationally. Think about that. Trump has never hit 50%. So that's why, again, men lie, women lie, numbers don't. So you have to ask yourself, why is Kamala Harris not doing as good as Democrats historically would be doing? And the reason why is her performance. If you look at how she performs in interviews, that's a problem. The way that she performed in the debate when you're talking about policy, that's a problem. And the overall image of Kamala Harris, a lot of people do not know who she is, but what they do know, it's not that positive. Okay, so there's a lot of what she said back in 2019 and 2020. That's getting as much attention as all this propaganda from the mainstream media. And throw in that people are not stupid. She's the vice president of the United States.
She was asked twice, right, during the debate and this interview she had on ABC. And twice they asked her how she was going to make American lives better. She didn't have an answer. What are you going to do to help us? Right? And then what, like 3 weeks ago, Trump comes out with the no tax on tips. That's going to help people that are waiters, waitresses, bartenders, valet parkers, anybody that works for tips. And then now, a few days ago, he comes out with no tax, right, on overtime. It's that kind of shit that helps Americans, right? So after sleeping on it for a while, I'm sorry, Kamala, but I'm voting for Trump, man. I'm gonna vote for the candidate that's gonna help my life, man. And right now, Trump, you got my vote, man.
This isn't rocket science, okay? You don't need a political science degree to understand what's happening right now. Most Americans believe that the economy is doing terrible, and they are affected by that. And that sentiment is affirmed even more when Democrats continue to gaslight that notion by celebrating the fact that inflation is lower than it's ever been, and that economically this has been a successful administration. That goes in one ear and out the other when it comes to voters. They don't see it that way, and it doesn't help Kamala Harris's cause. So again, she's losing on the policy debate, which is why the poll numbers are showing what they're showing. See, Joe Biden didn't have that problem because he was running for president for the first time. So what record could they compare when it came to Joe Biden versus Donald Trump? Well, there is a record when it comes to Kamala Harris and Donald Trump, and it's of her own doing because she won't separate herself from Joe Biden.
She is the worst polling Democrat against Donald Trump in history on national polls. No one is performing worse than her. No one's performing worse than her among blacks, among Hispanics, the worst performing Democrat in modern history among those demographics, worst performing polling wise among Jews. She is losing key factions of the Democratic base. Muslim voters, she's at under 50%, she's at 52% in the latest CARE poll among black Muslims. She is not doing well. She had a transformational life experience, apparently, where in 1,000 days, she has changed from a Bernie Sanders Democrat to a pro-choice Bush Democrat. She has abandoned almost every position, not just on fracking, on reparations for the sentence of slaves. She was gung-ho for a multi-trillion-dollar policy, never mentions it. She's completely against it. Obviously, the transgender illegal aliens in prison, which she did sit there and say that she was for. She was against ICE. She was for open borders, defund the police.
So we've made so many videos about that, and this guy is coming on and just exposing her once again. Van Jones could barely contain himself, just to be honest here. But listen, this is the story of her campaign. She is the worst polling Democrat, especially when you're talking about someone who's running against Trump, who a lot of people say is not the best polling Republican. Let's go over some final points about these polls and why it's truly signaling disaster for her campaign. We might have another 2016 situation where people are crying in the streets because she's going to lose. Number one, Donald Trump is going to overperform. He will. There's so many people, especially after the assassination attempt, that are going to vote for him, but they're not going to tell anyone. You guys have heard me say this repeatedly. Number two, it's the economy, stupid. People are struggling, and it's not getting any better. And the Democrats have made a huge mistake. Their messaging is still gaslighting everyday Americans who are feeling the gas prices, the grocery prices, the mortgage, the interest rates. No matter how many times they go on TV and say that our economy is the envy of the world, and now inflation is at an all-time low, people are not feeling that. And my final point here, Kamala Harris and the campaign is signaling that they are going to start putting her out there after rallies to do these local interviews. If they continue to do that, I honestly believe it's going to work against them, because every time she goes in front of a camera and she cannot use a script or a teleprompter, those videos are going to get clipped and then go viral on social media. I don't think that works for her. And this is what happens when you have a weak candidate who cannot do these interviews. I mean, easy interviews. I mean, softball interviews with zero pushback. I find it crazy that she choked in that interview. And that is my mindset around this. What is yours? What do you guys think about these new?
Arizona, and we'll be in Burbank, California. Go to jimmydore.com for a link for tickets. Here was another thing they did. So remember when Trump at the debate said, you know, she wants to use government funds to pay for illegal immigrants and prisoners to get trans surgery, and everybody was like, "Oh, he's crazy."
I know it's true.
It's true.
It's
and you
true.
want me to prove it to you?
I know.
Here, what's that? Oh, really? Oh, here it is. So, this is from Time Magazine. The original version of this story, they corrected themselves. The original version of this story, mischaracterized as false Donald Trump's statement accusing Kamala Harris of supporting transgender operations on illegal aliens in prison. As a presidential candidate in 2019, Harris filled out a questionnaire saying she supported taxpayer-funded gender transition treatment for imprisoned, meaning detained immigrants. Welcome to America. Now hand over your dick and balls. And nobody's using theirs anyway here. So even CNN was flummoxed when they found this out, that not only all the lies that she told, but CNN also called out ABC News for being biased in that debate, the moderators. But watch this. And these are the CNN, the biggest tools in the world. And even they can't help themselves. They have to call this out. Watch this.
Tonight, Kamala Harris releasing details of her policy positions for the first time on her campaign website. A K-file investigation has uncovered, meantime, a 2019 questionnaire. And in this questionnaire, Harris laid out some much more liberal stances, among them on immigration. So in 2019, in what K-file found, she said she would cut funding to ICE, writing, quote, "Our immigrant detention system is out of control, and I believe we must end the unfair incarceration of thousands of individuals, families, and children. I was one of the first senators after President Trump was elected to advocate for a decrease in funding to ICE." Well, now, of course, she's touting the Biden administration's executive order to crack down on the border. K-file's Andrew Kaczynski joins me now.
So that's just one thing. She was always against trying to secure the border. In fact, she wanted to defund it. And now here we go.
Andrew, that's pretty incredible on its own when you're talking about what you found here on ICE. What else did you find?
Yeah, and this was a questionnaire that she filled out for the ACLU, and this questionnaire is really an interesting snapshot in time of that 2019 Democratic primary. Kamala Harris was trying to get to the left of Bernie Sanders. She was trying to get to the left of Elizabeth Warren, and you really see that in a lot of these answers. And I want to walk our viewers through a little bit of what she said. Let's just take immigration and look at what she said here. She said on immigration, she made this open-ended pledge to end immigrant detention. She said she supported taxpayer-funded gender transition surgeries for detained migrants. She also said,
there it is. So when Trump said that, he was accurate. And everybody at ABC made him sound crazy. Everybody who covered that on the corporate media afterwards made it sound like he was crazy. There it is. Okay, there's more to this.
Taxpayer-funded gender transition surgeries for detained migrants. She actually said she supported that.
She both wrote and answered in the affirmative when she was asked this. Oh. And she said she also supported it for federal prisoners. Now, she also pledged to slash immigration detention by 50%, close all family and private facilities, and decrease funding for ICE, and then the end ICE detainers with local law enforcement.
I mean, these are things that, you know, it would be hard to think that you would come up with taxpayer funding gender transitions for detained migrants. And
taxpayer funded gender transition for migrants and illegal aliens and people in prison. Taxpayer funded.
This, as you say, written and verbally. You know, what else, you know, did you find?
Well, let's take a look at her answer here on drugs. She got asked about, the question from the ACLU was, since drug use is better addressed as a public health issue through treatment and other programming, will you support the decriminalization at the federal level of all drug possession for personal use? And Harris answers yes. Now, what would that mean? Well, I mean, the federal, all drug possession, that's not just marijuana, which she alluded to in her answer to this question, but it also would mean,
yes, federal level of all drug possession.
Fentanyl, crack, yes. Cocaine, things like that. Yeah.
Have they responded to you on her changes on these issues?
So we did put this question to the Harris campaign, the entire ACLU questionnaire, and the Harris campaign didn't answer any questions from CNN. Instead, they just provided a statement from an unnamed Harris campaign advisor that just said, the vice president's positions have been shaped by 3 years of effective governance as part of the Biden-Harris administration. Now, they declined to CNN to elaborate on what those positions were. And then they also provided this statement, which they attributed to a spokesperson saying, as president, she will take that same pragmatic approach, focusing on common sense solutions for the sake of progress. So where does she stand on this, all this questionnaire today? We don't know, and they won't say.
It's pretty incredible stuff. And thank you very much, Andrew K-File, for this reporting.
Even a CNN host is incredulous. It's pretty incredible stuff. Holy shit. So, and here she is talking to a transgendered lady. And here she is. She's going to say it in her own words.
That they were standing in the way of surgery.
For prisoners.
For prisoners. And there was a specific case. And when I learned about the case, I worked behind the scenes to not only make sure that that transgender woman got the services she was deserving. So it wasn't only about that case. I made sure that they changed the policy in the state of California so that every transgender inmate in the prison system would have access to the medical care that they desired and need. And I believe it was not only, I know it was historic in California, but I believe actually it may have been one of the first, if not the first in the country, where I pushed for that policy in a Department of Corrections.
So there she is bragging about using taxpayer funding to give prisoners transgender surgery. And maybe she was thinking, well, if we give a guy a set of tits, it'll make him harder for him to sneak through the bars and escape. Maybe that's what it was. But that's real.
No, it feels like comedy. Come on.
It seems like comedy.
Just too much. This is our country. And they said Trump was an embarrassment.
They have senior citizens who are having their medicine because they can't afford their pharmaceutical medicine. And she's there giving taxpayer funds for transition surgery in prison.
No, I can't. It's just too much. It's just wild. It's fucking wild.
So Paul says basically everything President Trump said was true, and ABC fact-checked him with lies. Conversely, everything Kamala Harris said was lies, and ABC did not fact-check her. Sounds like the legacy media we all know that needs to go out of business.
On the media.
Defund the media. Like
where's
your hat?
That hat?
Where's that hat? There it is.
Oh, that one's ungovernable.
Oh, that's ungovernable. Hang on. Defund the media. You could get it at what's your website?
Ultra free.
Ultrafree.com. Defund the media.
That's right.
That's real.
It's amazing. It's amazing.
And the people voting for Kamala Harris don't give a shit.
No. Well, I mean, because Taylor Swift is endorsing based on abortion and LGBTQ. And it's like, vote for social issues and you won't even have a social life after that happens, basically. You won't even have a chance to go get an abortion, or you won't have a chance to have your gay marriage, or, transition your 12-year-old if that's what you're really dying to do. Like, when did these things become so fucking important in life? And why can't my gay friends just be unique? Why can't everybody just be amazing and unique and colorful? Why do we have to be one fucking common denominator? I don't understand it. Socialist crazies.
Steph often makes the point of why used to be, or my gay friends, my cisgendered male gay friends.
I don't even know what that means.
I know.
My daughter has to define it for me. I'm like, what?
The only reason I know that is because my gay friend says, Jimmy, I'm barely even considered gay in the LGBTQ community. And I said, why?
He's not gay enough.
He said, I'm not gay enough. He goes, I'm a white cisgendered male who's gay. And that barely count. They don't even count us anymore.
Like Bret Easton Ellis. He's a great one. He's one of my favorites. You would love him, I think.
Okay.
Yeah, he did a whole book on Trump derangement syndrome. He wrote Less Than Zero in American Psycho.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he's fantastic.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And so my friend says, I used to dress up in my sister's clothing when I was a kid, and my mom caught me and she made me go to therapy. She goes, now, he said, if that happened to me now, he goes, I was lucky because now they'd say I was transgender and they'd start putting me on hormones and tell me I'm not a boy anymore. Yeah. And I remember that used to be the whole idea that, hey, you can be a boy and paint your nails. You can be a boy and want to wear a skirt. That doesn't make you a girl. You can still be a boy and do. I remember Greg Barrett did a whole show about how he likes to feel pretty and paint his nails.
How about glam rock?
What about glam rock?
All of it. What about Hedwig and the Angry Inch was one of my favorites. They didn't make a movement out of it. It was fucking awesome. And now they take every awesome thing that we fought for and turn it upside down.
So what they've done in our culture is now we've narrowed what the gender has to be. Instead of that should be, like you're saying, like, why can't my friends just be who they are? Why do we have to narrow it to, well, this is what a man has to appear like. This is what a woman has to be. Why can't a man wear a dress? Why can't a man do, if he wants to look feminine, why can't he still look feminine and still be a man? Why do I have to pretend he's supposed to be like me? Well, I never woke up in the middle of, in the morning with a Woody. Like, at the same time that he's never experienced what cramps feel like. So it's like, let's not pretend that you're something that you're not. How about we just expand what the definition is?
I mean, I just feel like it's all chaos used to confuse children so that everybody grows up in this super confusing era. And I also have a theory that the whole trans movement was about just getting the word trans into everyone's mouth because of their whole movement towards transhumanism. I feel like they want to sort of make everybody so there's just no more human. There's no more humanity to the story. Everybody is in a group. Everyone's in a group against each other. There's no more unity. We're not one people anymore. They didn't promote love. They promoted hatred between all these people with their pronouns. It's fucking bananas. I'm like, the only pronoun we need to have is we the fucking people. And we all stand together, or there's going to be no more rights, period.
Well, just to piggyback off that last story, or what we're talking about is, the invasion of women's spaces by biological males. Now, that doesn't mean, if I'm against that doesn't mean I'm anti-trans. I'm pro-trans. If you want to be trans, be trans.
Me too.
And whatever you want to be, I'm going to treat you with the same dignity and respect that I want to be treated with myself. But I think that's not okay for biological males to invade women's only spaces. And I think I'm in the majority in that now. Hey, come see us live. We're doing our Rumble Time show September 27th in Los Angeles.
project. It's located. China is building the world's most ambitious energy project. It's located in one of the most remote areas of the world, and when completed, will tap into the greatest natural energy potential found anywhere on planet Earth. Now, China is no stranger to ambitious engineering projects, and its latest endeavor to build the world's largest hydroelectric dam quite literally will change the way the world looks at energy production. Located deep within the Tibetan Himalayas lies the year-long Tangpu River. This river has the highest elevation of any major river in the world, and as a result has the highest hydroelectric potential found anywhere on Earth. China has been the most dedicated country in the world to peaking its carbon dioxide emissions before 2030 and achieving carbon neutrality before 2060. As a result, they are looking at this massive opportunity to create 300 billion kilowatt hours of clean, renewable, and zero carbon electricity annually. Not only would it be beneficial for China's green energy goals, but also for the region's prosperity as a whole. Yan Zhiyong, chairman of the Power Construction Corporation, describes the dam's potential. It is more than a hydropower project. It is also meaningful for the environment, national security, living standards, energy, and international cooperation. With a population of over 1.4 billion people, energy security and self-reliance are major priorities for China. Luckily for Beijing, China has the largest amount of hydroelectric energy potential of any country in the world, and is unsurprisingly already the world's largest hydroelectric power-producing country. Currently, China has more than 150 dams in operation, with each dam having a generating capacity of at least 300 megawatts. 4 of the world's 6 largest dams are located in China, and together, China's hydroelectric dam network accounts for 14.8% of China's total energy output, ranking it the second largest source of energy in China after coal. China is no stranger to massive infrastructure and engineering projects, and one of the country's most famous endeavors was the Three Gorges Dam located on the Yangtze River in the Hubei province. Although the construction of this dam was quite controversial at the time, mainly due to the displacement of over 1 million people and concerns about the local ecology. But the benefits of the dam almost 2 decades later are undeniable. The dam has been able to temper upstream floods that have been so disastrous to communities along the river for thousands of years. In addition, it plays a pivotal role in preventing downstream droughts. Finally, it has also created a thriving tourism industry for the local area. But most importantly, the dam creates an annual power generation of 100 billion kilowatt hours, making it not only the largest hydroelectric dam in the world, but the largest power plant anywhere in terms of total output. This plant alone provides 2 to 3% of China's total electricity needs and is a vital tool to meet the growing energy demands of central and eastern China. As impressive as the Three Gorges Dam may be, China's new Tibetan mega dam will set a myriad of new world records. It will be the largest hydroelectric project ever built, and as a result, produce an incredible 60 gigawatts of power, roughly 3 times the output of China's Three Gorges Dam. As I mentioned before, the key to this potential energy is the river's elevation. At an average height of 13,000 feet, or 4,000 meters, it is the highest major river in the world. Engineers have particularly identified the year-long Tangpu Canyon as the best site to construct this dam due to the drastic changes in elevation as the river bends. This canyon is the deepest in the world, at over 19,000 feet or 6,000 meters deep, which incredibly is 3 times deeper than the Grand Canyon in the United States. But what makes this dam site so special for electricity production is the rapid elevation change, starting at 2,900 meters and descending down to 660 meters near the Indian border. This quick natural drop in elevation creates a perfect location to harness the power of gravity, allowing the water to naturally descend and create an extreme amount of electricity. But of course, the construction of this project won't be easy. As you can imagine, the peaks of the Tibetan mountains are some of the most remote and hardest to travel areas in the entire world. The simple task of getting supplies to the construction site would be a massive feat by itself. But once again, if there is one nation that can pull this off, it's China. Let's not forget the Chinese began building the Great Wall of China in a mountainous region near Mongolia some 13 centuries ago. And perhaps the engineers of this new megadam will draw inspiration from China's Great Wall, which still stands proudly as one of the 7 new wonders of the world. But just like the Three Gorges Dam, this project has had its fair share of controversy. Let's first point out the potential dangers of this new mega dam, and then explain how China will use a unique construction method that will not only protect the local environment, but also the livelihood of everyone in the region. The first problem of constructing this megadam will be the disruptions to the local environment and ecology. These mountains and the region as a whole are considered holy to the local Tibetan people, and any large disruptions to the river would have large ecological consequences for the unique environment. The area's propensity for landslides and seismic activity would also be a major engineering obstacle to overcome, as any major earthquake in the area could prove disastrous for this mega project. Lastly, the river lies upstream of millions of people in both India and Bangladesh who are dependent on the water that flows from this river. The agriculture in these two countries are not just dependent on the water coming from the river, but also the sediment that comes from the water, which is also crucial in fertilizing the lands downstream for farming. Now, these potential problems might normally spell the end of any prospective engineering projects, but this is where Chinese ingenuity shines brightest. What if I told you there was a solution that could effectively address all of these issues in one go? Rather than relying on traditional damming methods, like China's Three Gorges or America's Hoover Dam, where water from a river is backed up into a reservoir and energy is produced from the gravity differential between the higher reservoir and the river, Chinese engineers have proposed implementing a run-of-the-river style dam that utilizes the natural flow of the river for its energy. As mentioned before, the water from this river rapidly descends thousands of meters. In this run-of-the-river dam, water would be redirected from the highest point of the river to the lowest point. They would do this by burrowing a tunnel through the Namcha Barwa mountain on a massive bend of the river as it descends. The water would then pass through a series of turbines as it descends to the lower part of the river, turning the turbines and creating massive amounts of electricity. The likely location of these 2 points would be the villages of Midong and Pei, which lie around 50 kilometers apart. This proposed method means that this project would be a megadam, not because of the sheer size of the structure like the Three Gorges, but because of the mega output of the energy produced. The run-of-the-river dam would ensure that the original flow of the river would be untouched, having a much more minimal impact on the environment and ensuring the crucial sediments from the mountains will still be able to flow for downstream agriculture in both Bangladesh and India. The fact that the project largely leaves the river in its natural state also refutes fear-mongering claims that China is using the construction of this dam as a geopolitical weapon to control its neighbors' water. Instead, China is capitalizing on a massive opportunity for energy and regional development by simply taking advantage of the natural flow of the river. In recent years, China and India have had several disputes over their Himalayan border. This international river is the latest development in this dispute, as the water would exit from the Chinese dam right near the Indian border, where the water flows into the Brahmaputra River. The fact that this dam is close to the border has been used by critics to push the water control narrative, despite the fact that China only contributes a small volume of the total flow of the river and has no plans nor capability to divert waters from the river. On the contrary, this dam has a great opportunity to enhance cooperation between the two nations. India is also planning to build their own 10-gigawatt dam downstream, and these two mega projects on their shared river will greatly benefit the region as a whole, as well as foster communication and cooperation between the two nations. Both leaders have recently expressed intensified efforts to cooperate across the border region, and this sentiment is only likely to intensify as China and India's relationship in the BRICS organization expands its influence. If there is any one country on earth that can achieve such a monumental feat, it is China, whose recent track record with massive projects like the Three Gorges Dam and the Hong Kong-Macau Bridge speaks for itself. This megadam represents one of the most ambitious engineering feats in human history, with the potential to generate a staggering 60,000 megawatts of electricity. This project could redefine energy production on a global scale and create an unparalleled source of clean energy. This colossal structure promises not only to power millions of homes, but also to cement China's position as the leader in renewable energy, fueling innovation and sustainable development across the entire region. Now, if you've made it to this point of
transformed into a global competition among the countries that want to lead the shift towards energy transition. The main players are, of course, two of the three great power states, the United States and China. as well as a group of other countries, including India and Saudi Arabia. According to the International Energy Agency, the critical minerals market is expected to surge from $40 billion in 2020 to $280 billion by 2030. And believe it or not, it is expected to increase to $400 billion by 2050. Needless to say, the more the competition ramps up, miners will want to expand infrastructure. They may want to find new projects and new fields if they have the capacity and the funding. And buyers will, of course, they will be willing to pay premium to get access to a reliable and secure source of those natural minerals. The race to secure minerals is so important right now that there is a threat of a lockout risk for those who fail to secure resources now. Just last week, U.S. Senator Lindsey Graham said, and I have that in one of my videos, you may want to watch it. Lindsey Graham said that, he said that Ukraine has vast natural resources, $1 trillion worth of natural resources, including lithium, uranium, and copper. And he said that the United States economy can use those resources for its own good, for its own benefit. So Lindsey Graham said that he's willing to send as many weapons as Zelensky wants him to in order to fight to the last Ukrainian to get his hands on those resources. Well, it was his words, not mine. You're welcome to watch that video. But that is a clear indication of just one of many reasons that are behind many current geopolitical and geoeconomic events and trends. As the demand for critical minerals has been surging, countries are now increasingly motivated to nationalize their resources. In 2022, for example, Mexico, being the home of the 10th largest lithium reserves in the world, decided to nationalize its lithium resources, while other countries retain golden shares in their major national resource companies. Right now, all eyes are on Africa. Africa will be the key region for the United States, the European Union, and China to secure access to crucial minerals. Being a home to 20% of the world's population, it has been historically exploited by European colonizers who, of course, did not reinvest back into its development. The goal was to extract as much as possible, then ship that back home to Europe, refine it, use it for manufacturing, and then turn around and sell it back, sell finished goods to African countries at much higher prices. Let's remember now a quite famous speech that was given by one of Burkina Faso's leaders about the true reasons behind armed conflicts under a variety of pretexts, under the pretext of democracy promotion, war and terror, or human rights. Take a look.
Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso are dealing with a war that was imposed upon them by imperialism under the pretext of terrorists. And these are sowing terror and destruction.
Wars for terrorism, which are maliciously fabricated and maintained, injected against us, especially in Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger. The real reason is really about the resources that are underground in the Sahel. This zone is unparalleled in the world in terms of wealth underground. Let's talk about mineral resources. Africa has 30% of the worldwide mineral reserves, 40% of gold reserves, 33% of diamond reserve, 80% of coltan reserve used for telephones, 60% of cobalt reserves for batteries, 55% of uranium reserves. The newspaper Le Monde in July 1957 put forth a figure of 6 to 7 million tons of oil found below our soil, potentially in the Sahara, in addition to the natural resources that we also have, such as uranium, gold, cobalt, zinc, diamonds, lithium, copper, etc. We do not want the looting, the cynical looting of our resources.
There's been international hypocrisy, and certain powers dominate the UN. They are complicit in pillaging Africa. We are living in an upside-down world. Bodies litter the beaches where billionaires bask. There's a dissonance between rhetoric and practice the facts. The UN Security Council is paralyzed. The UN must shoulder its responsibilities in a world of solidarity and justice as laid out in the UN Charter. And this requires it to have the courage to fight inequality. Inequality throughout the world is deliberate. Otherwise, with a modicum of courage and political will, we would be able, if not to eradicate them, at least to minimize them.
You, the Westerners, you so much love the Sahel people, so much that you bring your military and your armies to die in the name of democracy, in the name of freedom and human rights and peace. Then why is it that an African continent with some 1.3 billion people and the second largest continent of the world in terms of people, with a number that the interpreter cannot figure out of the number of square kilometers, and 54 states, has no permanent seat within the Security Council? Such a huge continent with so many people and no right of veto. How do you justify that? So let's stop with the diplomatic lying, the gross lies, which basically involves imperialist powers coming to the Sahel to defend quote unquote democracy.
As the race to secure critical minerals ramps up, the main geopolitical powers are putting a lot more emphasis on developing closer ties with African leaders. The continent has 40% of the world's gold and up to 90% of its chromium and platinum. The largest reserves of cobalt, diamonds, platinum, and uranium in the world are in Africa. It holds 65% of the world's arable land. Africa's sixth state, South Africa, Algeria, Angola, Libya, and Nigeria, produce 70% of Africa's mineral output. Here in the United States, we don't really hear anything about the events in Africa, but the recent China-Africa Cooperation Forum, which I wrote about in great detail on my Substack, by the way, it brought to light the increasingly important role of the African continent in geopolitics. Many African leaders understand the need to resist neocolonialism in all of its shapes and forms, and are moving to take greater control or nationalize all or a part of their natural resources. Recently, Ibrahim Traoré, the military leader of Burkina Faso, for example, retook their gold mines from a British company that just so happens to be the largest mining company in Africa. Traoré then turned around and immediately nationalized the gold mine after the takeover. The move was exactly what Gaddafi did, by the way, back in his time when he came to power. This is nothing new. More and more African countries are taking bigger stakes in their mining projects. For example, the DRC or the Republic of Congo, their government owns a 20% stake in its main copper mining project. Another emerging trend regarding critical minerals, especially in Africa, is restricting or banning raw critical minerals exports from their country of origin. In December of 2022, Zimbabwe banned all raw lithium exports, forcing mining companies domestically to start processing lithium in Zimbabwe. And so this is an undeniably big win for their economy in the long run. African countries are attracting more and more foreign direct investments, even from those nations, from those actors that previously had very little to do with the continent. Reportedly, the UAE has positioned itself as a direct competitor in the region to the United States and to China. The UAE's main goal is to diversify its economy away from being so dependent on oil, from oil dependence. And that shift has been quite successful for them, according to a variety of reports that I've come across recently and that you can easily look up online and get more acquainted with. The United States, China, and the UAE are investing in infrastructure to enable trade with Africa at the moment. The United States and the EU are investing in building a trade corridor from Zambia to Angola's coast, while China is investing in a railway linking mineral-rich Zambia to the Indian Ocean. The race to secure critical minerals will continue to ramp up, especially since many of these raw materials are needed for the military-industrial complex. With such vast natural resources, I believe that it is fair to say Africa will become more in focus for global leaders. The question here is whether great powers are willing to address the deadly mistakes of the past colonial times and deliver on their promises that they're making today to provide equally beneficial terms to their less economically developed partners. That remains to be seen. Nobody has a crystal ball. I will make sure to keep you updated. If you're interested, let me know in the comments. But following the Africa-China Cooperation Summit, the hopes are certainly high, and the transfer of skills and the transfer of technology will be key to their long-term success. Thanks for watching. As always, I appreciate your time. Remember to like, subscribe, and share if you enjoyed.
Announced that 34 countries have expressed interest in joining BRICS, either formally or through various levels of engagement. During a meeting with senior BRICS officials focused on security matters, Putin emphasized Russia's commitment to the bloc's expansion as it assumes the 2024 chairmanship. More than 36 countries, precisely 34, have shown interest in participating in BRICS activities in some capacity, Putin stated, underscoring Russia's priority to facilitate swift integration of new members. As chair of BRICS for 2024, Russia has approached the role with a sense of urgency and responsibility, according to Putin. Our chairmanship carries a special mandate to ensure the seamless and accelerated integration of new member states into all BRICS mechanisms, he added. Putin highlighted the group's accomplishments in addressing global security challenges, including efforts to combat cybercrime and terrorism. BRICS has developed a strong foundation of cooperation in areas such as counterterrorism, illegal arms and drug trafficking, transnational crime, and illegal migration, Putin said. He also pointed to the creation of a specialized electronic registry for sharing data on cyber attacks as a key achievement of the bloc's collaborative efforts. This video explores the growing interest from potential countries in joining BRICS and analyzes their potential contributions to the bloc. The discussion delves into how their membership could significantly expand BRICS's global influence and economic reach. Through an in-depth examination of the economic, political, and strategic implications, the video offers insights into how BRICS might evolve in the coming years, and what the inclusion of these new members could mean for the organization's role on the global stage. Turkey's economy is projected to grow by 4% in 2024, with a longer-term target of 4.5% by 2026. In 2023, GDP reached $1.024 trillion. Inflation remains a challenge, with the year-end inflation rate expected to be around 65%, but it is forecast to fall to 33% by 2024. The country's export target for 2024 is set at $255 billion, while tourism revenue is expected to reach $55.6 billion. Major trade partners remain Germany, the US, and the UK. Indonesia's GDP increased to approximately $1.31 trillion by 2024, with continued strong export performance in coal and palm oil. Exports in 2023 totaled $291 billion, and foreign direct investment remained robust at $43 billion. Indonesia's government continues to focus on diversifying the economy, with China, Japan, and the US remaining key trade partners. Thailand's 2022 GDP was $526 billion, supported by $312 billion in exports, particularly in office machine parts and cars. The country's economy is diverse, with strong contributions from industrial and agricultural sectors, and key partners include the US, China, and Japan. Nigeria's GDP reached $440 billion in 2022, driven by crude petroleum and petroleum gas exports, which totaled $70.7 billion. The economy remains heavily reliant on oil, with Spain, India, and the United States as major markets. Syria's economy remains deeply strained, with the 2024 GDP expected to decline further amid the ongoing conflict and sanctions. The country's GDP was last recorded at $8.97 billion in 2022. Trade continues to focus on olive oil and nuts as primary exports, while major imports like rolled tobacco and wheat flour come primarily from Turkey, UAE, and China. The economic situation is exacerbated by rising poverty levels, with nearly 70% of the population affected. Let's take a quick pause. Could you do us a favor? If you enjoy our content, please hit the like button. To help even more, leave your thoughts and feedback in the comments. Your engagement helps us grow. Thank you. In 2023, Bangladesh's GDP reached $460 billion, driven largely by the textile industry, which makes up 80% of exports. By 2024, exports from the ready-made garment sector set new records, amounting to $47.38 billion, despite global challenges. Bangladesh's key trade partners remain the United States, Germany, and the United Kingdom. Imports continue to include significant volumes of refined petroleum and raw cotton. Vietnam. Vietnam's GDP is projected to grow by 6.3% in 2024, following a recovery from previous slowdowns. Key exports like electrical machinery and textiles have driven strong trade performance, with exports reaching $399 billion. The country continues to deepen its ties with major trade partners such as the US, China, and Japan. Uganda. Uganda's economy is expected to grow by around 6% in 2024, supported by significant oil investments. Although oil exports are projected to begin in 2025, ongoing construction of related infrastructure has already begun to boost the economy. Exports remain focused on coffee and gold, while imports related to the oil project have expanded the trade deficit. Kazakhstan. Kazakhstan's economy continues its diversification efforts, with a GDP of $259.7 billion in 2022 and projections for continued growth. The country's focus remains on crude petroleum and gold as its major exports, with key destinations including China, Italy, and Russia. Kazakhstan is working towards economic diversification, especially in non-resource sectors. Cuba's economy, still recovering from pandemic shocks, registered a GDP of $107.35 billion in 2020, with exports totaling $1.9 billion in 2022. Tobacco and nickel remain key exports, with major trade partners including China, Spain, and Germany. The economy continues to face challenges from trade deficits and reliance on limited commodities. Eritrea's GDP in 2022 was $3.3 billion, with mining being the backbone of its economy. Zinc, gold, and copper are the primary exports, and key trade partners include China and the UAE. The economy remains heavily reliant on imports, particularly in food and machinery. South Sudan's 2022 GDP was recorded at $3.3 billion, with crude petroleum making up 99.4% of its exports. The economy faces ongoing challenges due to heavy dependence on oil and agriculture's vulnerability to adverse weather conditions. Pakistan's GDP in 2022 was $374.7 billion, with the textile sector remaining central to its exports, which totaled $31.3 billion. Key export markets include the US, China, and the UK. Imports, primarily machinery and chemicals, continue to come from China and the UAE. Belarus, facing geopolitical tensions and sanctions, had a GDP of $72.79 billion in 2022. Potassic fertilizers and refined petroleum remain its key exports, while China and Ukraine are major trade partners. Sri Lanka's economy had a GDP of $88.7 billion in 2022, with $14.8 billion in exports, including textiles and tea. The country continues to struggle with high import costs, especially in energy, and its main trade partners are the US, India, and the UK. Morocco's GDP stood at $130.91 billion in 2022, with exports, including fertilizers and vehicles, amounting to $46.7 billion. The economy faces a trade deficit due to significant imports of mineral fuels and machinery, with Spain, France, and Brazil as key trade partners. Honduras's GDP reached $31.72 billion in 2022. Key exports such as clothing and coffee remain crucial to the economy, with the United States being a significant trade partner alongside regional neighbors. Equatorial Guinea's 2022 GDP was $12.03 billion, with oil and gas exports dominating the economy. Agricultural potential remains significant but underdeveloped. Major export destinations include Zambia, Spain, and China. Azerbaijan's economy is heavily dependent on its oil and gas sector, with a GDP of $180.8 billion in 2022. The country's exports, particularly to Italy, Turkey, and Russia, remain strong, contributing to its significant trade surplus. Chad's GDP in 2022 was $13.67 billion, with oil making up 95.3% of its exports. The economy has limited diversification and significant potential in agriculture. Germany, China, and France are key trade partners. Venezuela's GDP in 2022 was $51.3 billion, with petroleum exports still being the primary driver of the economy. The country faces severe challenges, including hyperinflation and political instability, despite vast oil reserves. Bolivia's GDP was around $49.3 billion in 2023, with key exports including natural gas and gold. Brazil, Argentina, and India are among the primary destinations for Bolivia's mineral and agricultural exports. Bahrain's 2022 GDP stood at $47.1 billion, with aluminum and refined petroleum leading its $22.3 billion in exports. The country benefits from a robust financial sector and ongoing diversification efforts. Saudi Arabia and the UAE are its major trade partners. Zimbabwe's 2022 GDP was $27.37 billion, with exports of gold and tobacco reaching $8.41 billion. The economy faces significant challenges due to trade deficits and dependence on a few commodities, with the UAE and South Africa as primary trade partners. Nicaragua's GDP in 2022 was $15.67 billion, with $7.92 billion in exports, including clothing and gold. The United States and Mexico remain key markets, but the economy struggles with trade deficits and reliance on foreign assistance. Senegal's economy, with a GDP of $31.3 billion in 2023, is projected to grow as oil and gas industries emerge. Exports totaled $6.2 billion, driven by gold and phosphoric acid, with key markets including Mali, India, and Switzerland. Algeria's GDP was $244.75 billion in 2023, with petroleum gas and crude petroleum exports totaling $58.6 billion. The economy is highly dependent on hydrocarbons, with major trade partners including Italy, Spain, and France. That's all for this video.
Dollar as the world's reserve currency, and it is currently under major siege. Many countries are leaving the dollar. They're not going to leave the dollar with me. I'll say, you leave the dollar. You're not doing business with the United States because we're going to put 100% tariff on your goods.
I'm very much a traditionalist. I like staying with the dollar. You know that from when I was there. It's make the dollar the choice. I hate when countries go off the dollar. I would not allow countries to go off the dollar, because when we lose that standard, that will be like losing a revolutionary war. That will be a hit to our country, just like losing a war. And we can't let that happen. And too many countries now are fighting to get off the dollar.
Countries around the world are seeking alternatives to the US dollar. They're doing more and more trade in other currencies, and this is angering politicians in Washington. In particular, former President Donald Trump is furious, and Trump has pledged that if he comes back to the White House, he is going to punish countries that try to drop the dollar. In a campaign rally, Trump pledged that if he becomes president again, he is going to put 100% tariffs on countries that drop the dollar, which essentially means that he wants to block any country that refuses to use the dollar from trading with the United States. So Trump's solution is basically to divide the entire world into new economic blocks, and countries, if they want to trade with the US, if they want to get access to the big US market, they must do all of their international trade in the dollar. And if not, Trump will cut them out. What Trump is responding to here is what's known as de-dollarization. This is the movement around the world of countries trying to trade and invest in other currencies that aren't the dollar.
Many countries are leaving the dollar. They're not going to leave the dollar with me. I'll say, you leave the dollar. You're not doing business with the United States because we're going to put 100% tariff on your goods. Sir, we would like very much to get back to the dollar immediately. Thank you very much. It's so easy. I don't know.
Now, first of all, I should point out this is pretty crazy because the US has told countries for decades, has told foreign investors that doing your trade and holding your investments and assets in the dollar is good for you. We don't want to force you. You should do it because it benefits you. But now the US is in the stage of imperial decline where it is blackmailing countries, threatening countries, using mafia-style tactics, saying, if you don't use our currency, we will punish you. There will be very serious consequences. So this is a clear sign that there is a structural crisis going on in the dollar system. And one of the most important organizations pushing for de-dollarization is the BRICS bloc, founded by Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. And in the 2023 summit in South Africa, BRICS invited several new countries to join, including Iran, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, the United Arab Emirates, Ethiopia, and Argentina. Although Argentina is currently governed by a very pro-US, very far-right president, Javier Milei, who rejected the offer and refused to join BRICS. But despite that, dozens of countries across the global south have applied to join BRICS. It's very likely to keep expanding. And BRICS also has a bank, which used to be known as the BRICS Bank. It's now officially called the New Development Bank, NDB. And the president of the New Development Bank is the former leftist president of Brazil, Dilma Rousseff. And she has pledged that the bank is going to do more and more lending in other currencies, not the dollar. So the BRICS Bank is trying to de-dollarize, and members of BRICS are discussing creating an international unit of account, a kind of international currency that would allow them to maintain their own domestic currencies, but use the international unit of account in order to settle trade imbalances. In fact, Brazil's current leftist president, Lula da Silva, gave a historic speech in 2023 in China, in which he openly called for global de-dollarization. Lula, who is one of the co-founders of the BRICS, he was speaking at the New Development Bank, which is based in Shanghai. And in this speech, Lula said, quote, "Every night I ask myself why all countries have to base their trade on the dollar," end quote. And then he added, quote, "Why can't we do trade based on our own currencies?" And in fact, China and Brazil signed a historic agreement in 2023, de-dollarizing their trade. And what they'll do instead of using the dollar is that China will purchase imports from Brazil using the Brazilian real, and Brazil will purchase imports from China using the yuan, officially known as the renminbi, which is the Chinese currency. Of course, Russia has also been rapidly de-dollarizing its international trade. According to Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov, more than 90% of the bilateral trade between China and Russia uses their local currencies, the yuan and the ruble, and not the US dollar. That is to say, China and Russia have nearly completely de-dollarized their bilateral trade. Russia also came to an agreement with Iran in order to de-dollarize their trade and to instead use their own local currencies. And it's not just current BRICS members that are de-dollarizing. Other global South countries that have expressed interest in BRICS are also de-dollarizing. Like, for instance, in Southeast Asia, ASEAN, the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, has been de-dollarizing, and countries in the region have created new technologies, new financial infrastructure in order to transact, to trade with each other, and to process payments using their own local currencies, which cuts out the need for the US dollar. So this explains why US politicians like Donald Trump are so afraid of the growing de-dollarization. It's why Trump wants to threaten and punish countries that de-dollarize. And Trump even said in an interview, he said, "I hate when countries go off the dollar. I would not allow countries to go off the dollar."
I'm very much a traditionalist. I like staying with the dollar. You know that from when I was there. It's make the dollar the choice. I hate when countries go off the dollar. I would not allow countries to go off the dollar, because when we lose that standard, that will be like losing a revolutionary war. That will be a hit to our country, just like losing a war. And we can't let that happen. And too many countries now are fighting to get off the dollar.
Now, in order to try to punish countries that de-dollarize, Trump and his economic advisors have come up with a few potential threats. This is according to a report in Bloomberg. It notes that some of the penalties that the Trump team is considering, including export controls, charges of currency manipulation, and tariffs. And this is hilarious because it shows that when the US accuses countries of manipulating their currency, like, for instance, the US for many years has claimed that China supposedly unfairly undervalues the yuan. Well, now we see that US politicians are acknowledging that they use those accusations as a political weapon to try to punish other countries. So you know we're at a dangerous stage in the decline of US hegemony when the US has to threaten other countries in order to use its currency. Mainstream Western economists have repeated for decades that the dollar system is a public good. They insist that it's great for countries and investors and companies. They insist that it benefits people. And that, so you shouldn't have to force countries to trade and hold their assets in the dollar. When you have to force them, it's a clear sign that the system is weakening, that the US global chokehold on the financial system is weakening because there are now more and more alternatives. I mean, if you think about it, this is crazy. It's like if you go to a grocery store, a big grocery store, and you buy your food there, but they tell you that you can only buy your food with a token, a special token that they give you. Or maybe a more realistic thing would be they give you a specific credit card that you can only use at your favorite grocery store. But they then tell you, if you decide to shop at other grocery stores and you don't use their token, you don't use their credit card, then they will no longer allow you to buy food at their grocery store. So you will starve unless you use their tokens, their credit card. What would your response be? Well, obviously you would say, screw you. I'm not going to buy food from you anymore. I'm going to go buy food from another store, from someone else. You're not the only game in town. And this is precisely what's happening today. More and more countries see that there are alternatives, that the US is no longer the hegemon that it pretended to be in the unipolar era, trying to dominate the entire world with this global empire. In 2000, just a little over 20 years ago, it is true that the majority of countries had the US as their largest trading partner. But in the past 2 decades, that situation has fundamentally transformed. And now a majority of countries trade more with China than with any other country. China is their top trading partner. So now the US is saying, if you don't use the dollar in your international trade and to hold your assets and your reserves in the dollar, we will put 100% tariffs on you and we will prevent you from trading with us. But we're no longer your top trading partner. So these other countries will say, fine, screw you. We're going to trade more with not only China, but with Russia, with India, with Brazil, with Iran, with many other countries in the global south. And this is especially the case considering that the Western imperialist countries in the G7, the countries that colonize the world, their share of the world economy is decreasing over time, whereas the BRICS share of the global economy is increasing. And in fact, now the BRICS, the original 5 BRICS members, of course, China is by far the biggest among them, but if you combine all of their economies, they share a larger part of the global economy than all of the G7 economies combined when you measure GDP at purchasing power parity, PPP, which is by far the best way to understand the size of an economy because it adjusts for the purchasing power of the currencies in the countries instead of converting everything to dollars, which can be very misleading because the US dollar is right now very highly valued because of high interest rates in the US. And the point is that the dollar is significantly overvalued and the cost of living in the US is very expensive, whereas the cost of living in many countries in the global south is much lower, which means that their currencies actually are stronger than they appear when you simply convert them to dollars at current exchange rates. So if you look at a chart of the largest economies on earth, when you measure GDP at PPP, you can see that increasingly the biggest economies and the fastest growing economies are in the global south. China has the world's biggest economy at $35 trillion of GDP PPP. This is according to data from the IMF as of April 2024. The US has the second biggest economy at 28.8 trillion. India has the third biggest economy at 14.6 trillion. And then you also can see that the sixth biggest economy is Russia at 5.5 trillion. You can see that Indonesia now has the seventh biggest economy at 4.7 trillion. And Brazil has the eighth biggest economy at 4.3 trillion. So Brazil and Indonesia have larger economies than the UK and France. And Turkey and Mexico have larger economies than Italy, which is a member of the G7. So we're no longer living in the 1990s when the Western powers still dominated the world economically. We are in a fundamentally different era, and we can see the trend that the global economy is moving in. And we're already in a moment in which the global South economies are big, but they're also growing significantly faster than many of the Western economies, which some of which, by the way, are entering recession and are facing significant structural problems, especially deindustrialization. So this idea that Trump has, that he can simply prevent all countries that de-dollarize from trading with the US, is actually cutting off your nose to spite your face. This would actually massively accelerate de-dollarization. It would further encourage countries to seek alternatives to the dictatorship of the US dollar, because they would see that as they grow and as they seek more economic alternatives, the US will only put more and more pressure on them to try to punish them. They realize that the dollar system is not a global public good provides because it's out of the benevolence of its heart. But in reality, the dollar system is an imperialist system in which the US imports the wealth produced by workers around the world, and US capitalist oligarchs get richer and richer, holding on these assets, the value of which is artificially inflated, like stocks, US government bonds, and real estate, because capitalists around the world hold their wealth in the form of the US dollar. As countries de-dollarize and people no longer hold on to US dollar denominated assets, there will be less demand. Those assets will increase in value, and the oligarchs in the US will no longer benefit, which means they will try to pressure the government to threaten countries to stop de-dollarizing using these mafia-style tactics, which in turn is a positive feedback loop, which only further encourages countries to de-dollarize, which means the US has to be more and more aggressive and violent, threatening war, invasion, sanctions, tariffs, blockades, coups, color revolutions, to force countries to stay within the dollar system. We've already seen this go on for decades. Any country that tried to challenge the US empire and the dollar system, the dictatorship of the dollar, faced wars, faced color revolutions, faced coup attempts in Iraq, Libya, Venezuela. More and more countries have been threatened. But now we're at the point where China, Russia, the BRICS countries, Brazil. These are massive economies that are de-dollarizing, that are seeking alternatives, and the US no longer has the power that it had just a few decades ago. According to data from S&P Global, China's share of world trade has tripled in the past 2 decades. China's share of global trade is now 13 to 14% of the entire world. And what's also important is now slightly over half of China's international trade is settled in the yuan, not in the US dollar. This is according to data that was published by the International Monetary Fund in May. It shows that slightly over 50% of China's international receipts and payments are done using renminbi, and now under 50% use the US dollar. And the IMF also looked at what are referred to as the China bloc, that is, countries that are around China that do more and more trade with China. And you can see that the renminbi's share of their trade has been increasing over time. Now, that said, I do want to be clear that it is absolutely true that the US dollar still does dominate the majority of international trade and the reserves held by central banks around the world. And there's a chart that's often showed from the IMF that shows how dominant the US dollar is and how the yuan, the renminbi, is still a very small percentage. It's growing, but it's still very small. However, I think this is misleading. Simply looking at this chart does not help you understand what's happening, because the reality is that this is looking at the entire planet's trade and the entire planet's share of foreign exchange reserves held by central banks all around the world. But this is the wrong way of thinking about it. China is not trying to replace the US dollar with the renminbi. China is not interested in turning its currency into the global reserve currency, because then that would create a whole series of problems that the US has seen. Like, for instance, it would lead, by definition, China would have to maintain a current account deficit, a massive trade deficit with the rest of the world. That is, they would have to import more than it exports in order for other countries to get access to renminbi, to yuan, that they would need in order to do trade and investment in yuan. You obviously need yuan in order to buy things with yuan. And the flip side of that is it would also lead to deindustrialization in China. Like in the US, it's led to the massive loss of manufacturing jobs and the financialization of the US economy, the increasing power of a small class of financial capitalists who have more and more political power over the government. China does not want to recreate all of these problems. China does not want to be the global hegemon like the United States. China wants a multipolar world, and in particular, China wants a multipolar financial system in which countries can use different currencies for international trade and investment. So China doesn't care if India is doing trade with the US in dollars. China doesn't care if Germany and France are trading with each other in euros. China doesn't care if Japan and Canada are trading with each other in yen, because China's goal is not to replace all international trade with the yuan. China's goal is to de-dollarize its own trade and its own investments, and that's exactly what we see happening. And this is especially the case for crucial strategic commodities like oil and gas, like minerals. And China is signing more and more agreements with major commodity producers in order to de-dollarize their trade. So China is no longer held hostage to the US dollar. So if the US wants to block China from the US dominated financial system, if it accelerates the economic war in China and restricts China's access to dollars, well, China can still import oil and gas and minerals using its own currency. This is a national security problem for China. It's a matter of economic security. And in fact, China is making important progress on this. The South China Morning Post interviewed Saudi Arabia's Minister of Industry, who said that Riyadh is open to the idea of the petro yuan, that is, of buying oil from Saudi Arabia in yuan, not in US dollars. And we've already seen that China has been purchasing gas, liquefied natural gas, from the United Arab Emirates, also using yuan, using its own currency. This is the most important strategic goal of de-dollarization. It's not to replace the dollar and make everyone use the yuan. Russia's goal is not to make everyone in the world use the ruble. That's ridiculous. This is a matter of economic security and sovereignty of these countries. And so the US cannot continue to suffocate countries around the world that refuse to bow down and use only the dollar for international trade and investment. So I think this is a gradual process. Now, today I was talking about de-dollarization. I think it's also useful to distinguish between two kinds of de-dollarization. There is de-dollarization of international trade, and then there's de-dollarization of investment. De-dollarization, for instance, of the reserves held by central banks around the world. So we've seen, for instance, how the BRICS countries, many countries in the global south, especially China, are dumping US Treasury securities and dollar-denominated assets, and instead they're investing in more and more gold. They're essentially settling trade imbalances with gold instead of the US dollar, instead of US Treasury securities, which is US government debt. In fact, China's holdings of US Treasury securities peaked in 2013, and in the past decade, they have been very steadily falling and will likely fall even further as the US new Cold War on China heats up. What's incredible is if you look at China's foreign exchange reserves and the share that are made up by US securities, that is not only US Treasury securities, but also US government agency bonds and also equities from US companies, you can see that the Chinese holdings of US assets as a percentage of its GDP have actually fallen to the lowest level since China joined the World Trade Organization in 2001. This is what de-dollarization of investment, de-dollarization of reserves looks like, and it's likely going to continue in the years that come. Bloomberg reported that China sold a record amount of Treasury and US agency bonds in the first quarter of 2024. China sold $53.3 billion of US securities. And a financial analyst noted in this Bloomberg report that this is very significant because China is selling despite the fact that the US is on the verge of cutting interest rates. So when the Federal Reserve cuts interest rates, that means that existing US Treasury securities tend to go up in value because the interest rate on the current existing treasuries is higher than the future. Of course, when they reduce interest rates, that means that the future securities will have a lower interest rate. So that means that current Treasury bonds tend to go up in value. When the Fed is on the verge of cutting rates, which is almost guaranteed, that means that investors have an incentive to hold on to existing Treasury securities that they have because they're likely going to increase in value. Despite that, China has been selling its Treasury securities, which means that this is not for economic reasons. This is being done for political reasons. So this financial analyst quoted by Bloomberg says that there is a, quote, clear intention of diversifying away from US dollar holdings. China's selling of US securities could speed up as US-China trade war resumes, end quote, and especially if Trump returns as US president. So at the same time, while China is selling its US assets, this US debt, the Chinese central bank, the People's Bank of China, is investing in more and more gold, despite the fact that gold prices have been massively rising around the world, in no small part due to the fact that China and BRICS countries and many other global South central banks are investing in gold because they're afraid that the US could seize their assets like the US did to Russia's central bank or to Venezuela's central bank or to Iran or Afghanistan. So now the share of gold in China's reserves has risen to 5%, which is the highest rate since we had the data. I'll conclude today with a quote from a report that was published by JP Morgan, which is the biggest US bank. It's very powerful. In 2023, JP Morgan published a report titled "De-Dollarization: Is the US Dollar Losing Its Dominance?" And in the conclusion of the report, JP Morgan wrote, quote, "Overall, while marginal de-dollarization is expected, rapid de-dollarization is not on the cards," end quote. So they acknowledge that de-dollarization is happening. They don't think it'll be fast. However, JP Morgan concludes, quote, "Partial de-dollarization, in which the renminbi assumes some of the current functions of the dollar among non-aligned countries and China's trading partners, is more plausible, especially against a backdrop of strategic competition. This could over time give rise to regionalism, creating distinct economic and financial spheres of influence in which different currencies and markets assume central roles." I think this is exactly right. This is what is happening. As I said, China is not trying to simply replace the dollar with the renminbi. China is trying to create an alternative to the dictatorship of the US dollar, so it can trade and invest in other currencies, and other countries can trade and invest in other currencies as well. So they're not simply slaves to the US dollar system. So the US cannot try to destroy their economies if they refuse to obediently obey with everything that Washington wants. And Trump's threats to tariff countries and to blockade and impose sanctions on more and more countries, these threats are actually dividing the global economy into blocks. So the US will continue trading with its obedient, subservient allies and proxies like Europe, Japan, South Korea. And meanwhile, China and Russia and the BRICS countries will trade in other currencies and invest in other currencies. And then there will be a lot of other countries that are playing both sides, that are non-aligned, countries like Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, countries like Egypt, countries like Mexico. They'll play both sides and do what's in their own interest. But by threatening countries like this, Trump is further dividing the global economy, and he is cutting off the US dollar system's nose to spite its face. This is weakening US hegemony, but we're at the point where US imperialism is in crisis, and in order to try to maintain its hegemony, to try to maintain its dominance, it can no longer rely on countries doing it voluntarily. It has to force them, to threaten them, and that means that it is sowing the seeds of its own destruction. On that note, I'm going to conclude.
That was the scene in some part of Tel Aviv early today. A Yemeni ballistic missile allegedly broke through Israeli defenses and caused significant alarm as it hit a target in central Israel. According to Israeli media, the missile traveled nearly 2,000 kilometers, and surprisingly, it wasn't intercepted by Israel's famed Iron Dome. Reports suggest that it landed in an open area, sparking chaos, but reportedly avoiding major casualties. Out of the 2 million people who frantically rushed to bomb shelters, 9 were injured, with some hospitalized. However, there are conflicting reports that claim the missile may have hit a gas plant. If this is confirmed, it would mark a turning point, a Yemeni strike reaching deep into Israeli territory for the first time, especially from such a considerable distance. Now, it's one thing for Yemen to strike Tel Aviv with a drone. Drones can move more discreetly, hugging coastlines and weaving through areas of less scrutiny. A drone attack can be calculated, its journey slower and more indirect, perhaps even taking a scenic route through the Red Sea, squeezing past the Suez or flying over the Sinai before veering sharply to strike Tel Aviv from the Mediterranean. But when we're talking about a ballistic missile, that's a different ballgame entirely. Ballistic missiles are not stealthy. They are fast, loud, loud and difficult to miss on radar. This raises many questions about Israel's defense systems and whether we are witnessing the most significant security failure since the October 7th incident. For a missile to travel from Yemen to Tel Aviv, it would have to cover roughly 1,700 kilometers, a journey that should have set off alarms long before reaching Israeli airspace. This is not a small feat, and logically, the missile would have passed over Saudi Arabia, Jordan, and Israeli-controlled territories that are tightly monitored by advanced radar systems. In the perfect scenario for Israel's security, the Arrow missile defense system should have detected this incoming threat and neutralized it before it even got close to Israeli soil. But this time nothing happened. The missile reached Tel Aviv's airspace before anyone could react. The Iron Dome, which is designed to shoot down short-range projectiles like rockets and mortar shells, activated too late to make a difference. It's not intended to deal with long-range ballistic missiles, and that might explain its failure in this instance. What we don't know yet is who exactly is responsible for this attack. No group has claimed responsibility so far, but speculation is rife. A senior Yemeni official took to X, formerly known as Twitter, and posted a message in Hebrew, teasing that their leader would address the situation later today. The official, Hezam al-Assad, hinted that something significant was brewing, taunting occupiers in his post. Whether in your underground shelters or outside of them, it would behoove you to listen with close attention this afternoon to what is said by Abdul Malik al-Houthi, he wrote. Alongside this cryptic message, he posted an image of al-Houthi, the leader of the Yemeni military in Yemen. While this post doesn't explicitly claim responsibility, it certainly suggests that Yemen's military are behind the attack. Now, what does this mean for the broader geopolitical landscape? The implications of a Yemeni missile hitting Tel Aviv are enormous. This isn't just about the immediate damage caused by the strike. It's about the message that it sends to Israel, its neighbors, and the world. First and foremost, it signals that Israel's long-standing belief in its invincibility may be crumbling. The fact that a missile could travel that far, completely bypassing multiple layers of defense systems, points to serious vulnerabilities in Israel's security apparatus. It also highlights a growing sophistication in Yemen's military capabilities. If the Houthis were able to execute this attack, it means they now possess the technology and operational reach to strike Israel, a nation previously considered far out of their range. Moreover, this event could dramatically alter the calculus of future military engagements. If Yemeni missiles can reach as far as Tel Aviv, other nations and non-state actors in the region are likely to reassess their own strategies. Occupation resistance may see this as an opportunity to exploit its vulnerabilities, while Israel itself will be forced to reconsider its defense priorities. The Iron Dome has been a source of national pride for the occupation, a shield that was believed to provide almost impenetrable protection. Now that confidence has been shaken, and occupation leadership will have to address these shortcomings swiftly, possibly by ramping up investment in more advanced missile defense systems like the Arrow or David's Sling. But beyond military implications, there's a psychological impact at play here. The citizens of Tel Aviv and other parts of occupied Palestine have long lived with the threat of rocket fire, but this is different. Ballistic missiles carry a different weight, literally and figuratively. They are larger, more destructive, and more difficult to defend against. The mere fact that millions of occupiers had to rush to bomb shelters, with some being injured in the process, is a stark reminder that no one is truly safe. This could lead to a growing sense of insecurity among the occupation public, further complicating an already volatile situation. In the broader Middle Eastern context, this strike, if confirmed, could encourage Iran and the axis of resistance. The Houthis are widely understood to be backed by Iran, and this attack could be seen as a direct challenge to the occupation and its Western allies. It's not just about Yemen anymore. This attack represents a much larger power struggle playing out across the region. Iran, through its allied forces, is sending a clear message. They are capable of reaching deep into occupied territory, and they are willing to end the suffering and occupation of Palestinian lands at the appropriate time. Many people have suggested that the Yemeni military utilized the Hatem-2 ballistic missile in strike-occupied territories this morning. For clarity purpose, let's examine how this ballistic missile type works and why it is a significant warning to the occupation in Palestine. The Hatem-2 ballistic missile, used by the Yemeni armed forces, is quickly becoming a game-changer in the region's military dynamics. Yemen's development of this missile type signals a significant leap in their military capabilities, especially given its successful deployment in striking key targets as far away as Tel Aviv. The Hatem-2 isn't just a long-range missile, it showcases both range and precision, making it a serious threat in any conflict where it's deployed. Let's break down what makes the Hatem-2 so notable. First, it has an impressive range, able to travel nearly 2,000 kilometers, which allows it to hit targets far beyond Yemen's immediate surroundings. This long-range capability means that even heavily fortified areas like Tel Aviv aren't beyond its reach. The missile's ability to carry out such a long-distance attack without being intercepted by Israel's sophisticated defense systems, such as the Iron Dome or the Arrow, raises serious concerns about how nations might protect themselves from these types of weapons in the future. Another key feature of the Hatem-2 is its precision. This isn't a missile that just randomly hits a general area. It's designed to target specific sites with accuracy, which we saw when it successfully struck a vital facility in Tel Aviv. The fact that Yemen, despite being embroiled in its own internal conflict, has developed a missile capable of such precise, long-range attacks reflects the increasing sophistication of their military technology, likely aided by their allies. Politically and militarily, the Hatem-2 represents a new kind of challenge. Israel, long accustomed to defending itself against short-range rocket fire, now faces the reality of a missile threat from much farther away. The fact that a missile launched from Yemen can bypass Israel's defense systems and hit a critical target suggests that the region's balance of power is shifting. Israel may now need to reassess its defenses, potentially increasing reliance on systems like the Arrow or David's Sling, which are better suited to counter long-range ballistic missiles like the Hatem-2. For Yemen, the Hatem-2 is more than just a military asset. It's a symbol of resilience and capability. By successfully deploying this missile, the Yemeni armed forces are sending a clear message. They have the means to strike at their enemies, no matter the distance. It also suggests that we could see more attacks using this missile in the future, particularly if tensions continue to escalate between Yemen and other nations in the region, including Israel. In a related development, the Israeli Occupation Forces, IOF, reported that around 40 rockets were fired from Lebanon, targeting the Galilee Panhandle and the Golan Heights. Sirens blared throughout the region, sending residents scrambling for cover as the barrage unfolded. According to the IOF, their air defense systems managed to intercept some of the rockets, while others landed in open areas, causing no direct injuries. However, the rocket impact sparked fires in various locations, with local teams rushing to contain the blazes. Thankfully, no one was hurt, but the situation added a layer of tension to an already volatile border. The rockets were fired by Hezbollah, the Lebanese resistance group, in what they described as retaliation for recent Israeli airstrikes in Lebanon. This back and forth has been escalating over the past few days, with both sides exchanging fire as the situation intensifies. Hezbollah claimed responsibility for today's attack, stating that it had specifically targeted an Israeli military base using dozens of Katyusha rockets. According to their statement, the strike was a direct response to Israeli actions in Lebanon, particularly an alleged drone strike that took place just yesterday in the coastal village of Sarafand, south of Sidon. That strike, aimed at a motorcycle in the village, has been the subject of widespread outrage in Lebanon, further fueling tensions. What's clear is that this isn't an isolated incident. In recent weeks, we've seen a noticeable increase in the frequency of rocket fire, airstrikes, and skirmishes along the Israel-Lebanon border. Both sides are on high alert, and with each attack, the chances of a wider escalation seem to grow. For many in the region, these exchanges have become an all-too-familiar pattern, one that leaves both sides living in a constant state of uncertainty. Today's rocket fire underscores the fragile nature of the situation in the north. The Galilee Panhandle and the Golan Heights are strategic regions for Israel, and attacks like these are a stark reminder of how quickly things can spiral. Despite the rockets landing in open areas this time, the risk remains that future strikes could hit more populated zones, leading to casualties and, inevitably, further retaliation. On the Lebanese side, Hezbollah's decision to strike back with such a heavy barrage sends a clear message. They are ready and willing to respond to any Israeli action, especially when it involves attacks within Lebanese territory. Hezbollah, long positioned as a key resistance force against Israeli occupation, has always been quick to retaliate when it feels its sovereignty is being violated. And with the recent drone strike in Sarafand, it appears that line was crossed once again, prompting today's rocket attack. For residents in both Israel and Lebanon, the situation is tense. While today's attack didn't result in injuries, the psychological toll is undeniable. In occupied Palestine, residents in the north are getting used to the sound of sirens and the rush to bomb shelters. While in Lebanon, the fear of further occupation airstrikes looms large. As Hezbollah continues to assert itself as a defender of Lebanese sovereignty, it seems likely that these exchanges will continue, keeping both sides on edge.
The conflict in Ukraine continues to grind on. Ukrainian forces continue to deteriorate, both along the line of contact, but also amid their ongoing occupation of a small section of Kursk inside Russia, pre-2014 Russian borders. We will take a look at the battlefield and what is transpiring there. We will also take a look at some of the potential next steps the United States will take to both perpetuate this conflict and continue pursuing their agenda, which ultimately is to encircle, contain, overextend, divide, and destroy Russia, which is, again, part of a much wider global strategy that has been persistent since the end of the Cold War, that is to eliminate all peer and near-peer competitors. Existing competitors, potential competitors. This is what has defined U.S. foreign policy for decades now. So let's take a look at the map. This is liveuamap.com. This is a pro-Ukrainian live map, so keep that in mind when we look at it. This is a map that is going to try to delay reporting any successes of Russia for as long as possible. But even this pro-Ukrainian map is painting a bleak picture for Ukraine, and it has been for quite a long time. It is impossible to paper over what is now happening in Ukraine. So let's take a look. For those unfamiliar, red is Russian-held territory. This includes Crimea, which passed a referendum to join the Russian Federation in 2014. It also includes Kherson, part of Kherson, Zaporozhye, the Donbas region, and part of Kharkov. The area in particular that most of the focus is on, at any rate, is this area close to Donetsk city, directly west towards Pokrovsk. We've been hearing a lot about that. The salient continues to expand. We can see another salient down here, and we can see efforts to join them right here, ongoing. So this is going to become one large salient. You can see how it's starting to extend over Vuhledar, right here. Vuhledar is a heavily fortified Ukrainian position. Russian forces have been trying to encircle and take Vuhledar for some time. They've been grinding down Ukrainian defenses there for some time. We're talking months, if not a year or more. By compromising the surrounding area, they will compromise Ukraine's ability to continue to support Vuhledar operationally. So that is what is happening. This is what the Western media is primarily focused on. I will go over articles where they talk about the continued deterioration of Ukrainian defenses around Pokrovsk. But if you look elsewhere along the line of contact, you will see Russian forces making progress elsewhere. There is fighting still taking place west of Bakhmut toward Chasiv Yar. We also have continued fighting toward Kharkov and Kupiansk. Of course, Russia maintains this relatively newer front in Kharkov, north of Kharkov city. And of course, we have this. This is the Ukrainian incursion into Kursk. Now, I very recently published a map, an edited image taken from liveuamap.com. I added in these arrows. This blue line is a waterway across which there were bridges that Ukraine was attacking. Now, these explosion icons don't actually represent the exact position of these bridges. It's just to depict the process of Ukraine striking and trying to destroy these bridges. The idea was, there was speculation that Ukraine would try to move into this area. And as a matter of fact, this map actually indicates that there is a Ukrainian presence here along the border. Now, what had happened, and the red arrows indicate an actual Russian offensive reported on by both the Russian Ministry of Defense, but also the Ukrainian military and pro-Western, pro-Ukrainian commentators and analysts. Russian forces pushed all the way down to the border west of Ukraine's incursion here. And now Ukraine finds itself surrounded by a growing number of increasingly capable Russian forces. It's important to understand the whole reason Ukraine went into Kursk in the first place was because there was scarcely any Russian forces there. They attacked where Russian forces weren't. Now, Russian forces are there in large numbers, bringing in an increasing number of military capabilities, and they are surrounding and grinding down the Ukrainian presence in Kursk. Now, going back to this map, at a minimum, what the Ukrainians were trying to do by hitting these bridges was actually prevent Russian forces from moving to a position west of Ukraine's incursion here, to prevent it from being surrounded on all three sides by Russian forces. Well, now that has failed. If there was some sort of process of taking the rest of this territory, which the blue arrows indicated a potential speculative incursion, further incursion of Ukrainian forces, the idea was to hit these bridges, prevent Russian forces from operating in this area and allowing Ukraine to hold this territory long term. But because Russian forces have now established this position, they're cutting the potential Ukrainian occupation of all of this territory in half, and they're ensuring a steady flow of logistics to combat operations in this area, extending westward. So whatever plans Ukraine had for Kursk, these plans are being derailed as we speak, and this is something that the Western media has itself been covering. So let's get into that. This is Foreign Affairs from September 2nd, 2024. This is by Michael Kaufman and Rob Lee, and these are two widely cited commentators regarding the conflict in Ukraine. They go to Ukraine relatively often. They collect information, they come back, and they present it in articles like this. And the title is Ukraine's Gamble, the Risks and Rewards of the Offensive into Russia's Kursk region. Now, no sooner did they publish this and examine all the potential rewards that Ukraine might gain by this incursion, no sooner did they publish this that everything began rapidly unraveling, which was entirely predictable. There are no rewards for Ukraine in Kursk. There are none at all. As I said, the moment this incursion began unfolding, this was a strategic blunder. This was only going to further overextend already overextended Ukrainian forces. They have no troops or equipment or ammunition to spare just to defend the line of contact, let alone send thousands, 10,000 or more troops into Russian territory. I pointed out the fact that if Ukrainian forces could not hold heavily fortified positions along the line of contact with relatively decent logistical support, there's absolutely no way they're going to be able to hold territory in Russia without those fortifications and without that logistical support. Now, every single aspect of that analysis is being confirmed by the Western media, citing both US military officials and also Ukrainian officials and commanding officers on the field of battle. So let's read a little bit from this foreign affairs piece. And this was the thinking before everything started to unravel. And then let's talk about how it has unraveled by looking at more recent reports from the Western media. On August 6th, Ukraine launched a bold offensive into Russia's Kursk region, leveraging surprise and speed to quickly bypass Russian defensive lines. There were hardly any defenses to speak of. There was hardly a Russian military presence in Kursk at all, which is exactly why Ukraine picked this place to attack. And yes, when you are waging war, you try to attack your enemy where they aren't, avoid where they are strongest. This is a tenet of military strategy, stretching all the way back to Sun Tzu's The Art of War. But if your military is already badly losing, you have no resources to spare, doing something like this is only going to make the situation worse, not better. So there's a time and a place for attacking where the enemy isn't. And you have to attack the enemy where they aren't in a way that makes strategic sense, not because that's the only place you can attack without being immediately annihilated. Since then, Ukraine has captured a significant tract of Russian territory and taken hundreds of Russian soldiers as prisoners. Now, 3 weeks into the attack, so this was as of September 2nd, Ukrainian forces are holding territory and continuing offensive operations. They appear intent on consolidating a defensible buffer inside Russia. Well, this has all now unraveled, admittedly unraveled. This offensive has shifted the formerly gloomy narrative, at least for the moment, about the negative trajectory of the war. Again, that was as of September 2nd. As of now, September 15th, 2024, the narrative is gloomier than ever because now there's this admission that the Kursk incursion was a strategic blunder, and it has actually accelerated the collapse of Ukrainian forces along the line of contact. Now that, again, September 2nd, this is from CNN, this is September 8th. So 6 days after this article, Foreign Affairs piece was published, outgunned and outnumbered, Ukraine's military struggling with low morale and desertion. So this morale boost, this change in the gloomy narrative to something more optimistic, almost immediately unraveled. There was no substance to this. It was a PR stunt. And like all PR stunts Ukraine engages in, has a very fleeting effect. This CNN article on September 8th says 2.5 years of Russia's grinding offensive have decimated many Ukrainian units. Reinforcements are few and far between, leaving some soldiers exhausted and demoralized. The situation is particularly dire among infantry units near Pokrovsk and elsewhere on the eastern front line, where Ukraine is struggling to stop Russia's creeping advances. CNN spoke to 6 commanders and officers who are or were until recently fighting or supervising units in the area. All 6 said desertion and insubordination are becoming a widespread problem, especially among newly recruited soldiers. So this was something that was already well underway, long in the making. You can understand why Ukraine would be tempted to launch a PR stunt like the Kursk incursion. But again, PR stunts paper over your problems. They don't address the fundamental issues that have created them. Now, getting back to the foreign affairs piece, it says, the offensive has yet to draw significant Russian forces from Ukraine's eastern regions, and it remains unclear how Ukraine's leaders intend to translate this tactical success into strategic or political gains. Well, it hadn't been drawing off Russian forces. It isn't, and it won't. Because as the incursion, the occupation in Kursk begins to crumble and deteriorate, there's less and less reason for Russia to move forces that are operating across the Donbas region to Kursk. By redirecting resources away from defensive efforts in the eastern Donetsk region, Ukraine is betting that other parts of the 750-mile front won't collapse, that it will not lose a large number of soldiers and equipment in Kursk, and that the benefits from its operations in Kursk will outweigh the costs sustained elsewhere. Well, now we can see that actually the front line is beginning to crumble and collapse at an accelerated rate, admittedly because of the Kursk incursion. It continues, Ukraine's military leadership also hoped the incursion would divert Russian forces from its front lines in the east. However, the commander-in-chief of the Ukrainian armed forces, Alexander Sursky, said that Russia has instead intensified its efforts and deployed its most combat-ready units to the Pokrovsk front in Donetsk. So it has achieved the exact opposite, has intensified Russian operations along the line of contact against weakened Ukrainian positions because Ukraine drew off troops and equipment to send to Kursk. So an absolute strategic blunder working to accelerate the collapse of Ukraine's front line. And of course, this the CNN article wasn't the only article painting a gloomy picture following the Kursk incursion. We have this from The Economist: danger in Donbas as Ukraine's front line falters. So it's not me saying Ukraine's front lines are faltering. It's the Western media. It's The Economist. Russian fighters are trying to encircle the defenders. And this is something that this was as of September 8th. There's this more recent BBC article. This is from today, September 14th, 15th, depending on where you are in the world. Ukrainians warn of being surrounded as Russia advances in east. So what you will hear is that, yes, Russia was advancing toward Pokrovsk, but Ukraine has since stabilized the front. Well, no, it didn't. As I explained, the closer Russian forces get to Pokrovsk, which is a built-up urban area, the slower they're going to work because the more dense Ukrainian defenses are, the longer it will take to grind them down with long-range fires and other military operations. This is the pattern that we have seen play out in Bakhmut, Avdiivka, now Pokrovsk. The Economist says for the past 2 months, Russia has poured most of these resources into attacking the logistical hub of Pokrovsk. The push advanced at an alarming rate and even accelerated after Ukraine launched an operation inside Russia that was designed to reduce the pressure. So again, it's not me making these claims. It's not the Russian Ministry of Defense making these claims. They are saying this, but it's because this is reality. And this is a reality that even Western media is now admitting. Now, The Economist talks about logistics along the line of contact, not in Kursk, not the Ukrainian presence in Kursk, the Ukrainian line of contact, their most heavily fortified positions. This is what they say about logistics along the line of contact. Fuel trucks, supply vehicles, and headquarters have been pushed back, hiding from the tightening Russian noose. Resupply is no longer quick. Getting mortars or Javelin anti-tank rockets takes half a day at best. Evacuating the wounded is more complicated. There are field hospitals nearby to stabilize the worst off, but with the main road to Pokrovsk now cut, fewer make it to the full-fledged hospital in time. So this is the situation Ukrainian forces in their heavily fortified positions along the line of contact face in terms of logistics. How do you think Ukrainian forces in Kursk are doing in terms of fortifications and logistics? The Economist also notes Russia's numerical advantages along the line of contact, as well as advantages in drones and electronic warfare, which is something that I've been talking about all throughout the special military operation since it began in February 2022, something that I was accused of being a Russian propagandist for saying, but now something that The Economist and many others across the Western media are admitting. It is an inconvenient truth, but it is the truth nonetheless. Getting back to the foreign affairs piece, again, September 2nd, And just think about how quickly things have changed from when that was written and then published to now what is unfolding admittedly, according to the Western media. Ukraine's Kursk incursion has raised flagging morale among its troops and restored the initiative along a patch of the front. No, it didn't, not for any meaningful amount of time. The attack has also deeply embarrassed Moscow, maybe, demonstrating how unprepared Russia was for an offensive operation along the border. 3 months after launching its own incursion into Kharkov, Russia's leadership undoubtedly believed that the war was steadily going its way and that time was on its side. Well, it is going Russia's way. Time is on Russia's side, even if a PR stunt tries to make it appear otherwise. Clearly, it is working in favor of Russia, and you can see even this PR stunt unraveling specifically because it is working in Russia's favor. Kursk will force Moscow to consider that Ukraine retains options and that the outcome of this war is still unsettled. Actually, I think it is now proven exactly the opposite. It proves that no matter what Ukraine does, no matter how successful it is in the short term, in the long term, all factors favor Russia, and as long as Russia stays the course, it will prevail. Again, these political factors are very temporary. These PR stunts do not address the fundamental issues creating this crisis for Ukraine in the first place. And if they do not address these fundamental issues, they're not going to change the outcome of this conflict. The offensive does not redress the current material imbalance in the war. So even this foreign affairs piece is admitting that the fundamental factors driving this conflict, the outcome of this conflict, have not been addressed by this Ukrainian PR stunt into Kursk. For now, Russia retains an advantage in manpower, equipment, and ammunition. And then they say this advantage has not proved decisive. How has it not proved decisive? Russian forces are clearly annihilating Ukraine's capacity to make war, to the point where their heavily fortified front line is collapsing, even after launching an incursion into Russian territory, failing to divert Russian forces because Russian military power has continued to grow as they continue to grind down Ukraine's military power. When they say it hasn't been decisive, they're talking solely in terms of territorial capture, because in their mind, Michael Kaufman and Rob Lee still see this as a war of territorial conquest. They do not seem to understand or grasp the strategy of attrition Russia is using. They're not trying to break through Ukrainian defenses and seize territory. They're trying to annihilate Ukrainian defenses. And then as Ukrainian forces fall back, they gain territory. It is a completely different process. It is abundantly clear that this is the strategy Russia is using, and yet they continue insisting on this theory of victory based on territorial conquest. And I don't know if they're doing that because they honestly can't understand or comprehend what is going on, or if it's a convenient propaganda ploy to convince people who still pay attention to what they are saying, to convince them that somehow Russia is losing, even as they clearly are annihilating Ukrainian forces, collapsing their fighting capacity in a slow motion campaign along the entire line of contact. Now, getting back to Michael Kaufman and Rob Lee's piece in Foreign Affairs, this is how it concludes. Since 2023, Washington has been out of ideas for how to successfully end the war on terms favorable to Ukraine. There are no terms favorable to Ukraine that this can conclude on. Kiev, meanwhile, has been focused on stabilizing the front line, but equally worried about the prevailing gloomy narrative and the sense that Ukraine is losing the war. There's not a sense that Ukraine is losing the war. Ukraine is losing the war. The Kursk operation helps address the latter at the risk of doing damage to the former. And then it turns out, no, actually, it's not helping either. Whether or not Kursk succeeds, well, it is failing before our very eyes. At least it is not an attempt to refight the failed 2023 offensive, a set-piece battle in which Ukraine held no decisive advantages. Ukraine only held an advantage in Kursk, in the opening phase of the operation, because there were no Russian forces there. Again, there are now Russian forces there. They have no advantages, and they are being obliterated. It makes no sense at all for Ukrainian forces to continue operating in Kursk. It's just going to get them killed, and it's going to strain an already overloaded logistical network. This obsession with the narrative. Again, you can paper over the narrative. You can convince large numbers of people that Ukraine is not losing the war, but that does not actually change the fact that Ukraine is losing the war. This is all an attempt to paper over reality, not address the factors actually shaping that reality. And then it talks about an attempt to refight the failed 2023 offensive. They're saying at least they're not trying to do that. Well, the reality is they have no ability to stage another offensive operation on the scale of the 2023 offensive. This is something that I had pointed out, that Ukrainian combat capabilities and the West's support for Ukraine will just gradually decrease, continuously decrease, both in absolute terms and also relative to growing Russian military power. The Foreign Affairs piece continues. It says, that said, Kiev's present theory of success remains unclear. Beyond the Kursk offensive and the situation at the front, Russia's strike campaigns against Ukraine's energy grid is increasingly the bigger problem. Ukraine faces an uncertain winter. It needs generators and air defense to close gaps in its coverage. There is no way to get enough air defense to close gaps in its coverage. The West literally, physically cannot create enough air defense systems or munitions to protect Ukraine from Russian missile and drone attacks. More important, Ukraine needs a way to compel Russia to stop these strikes, if not in 2024, then certainly in 2025. In this light, Ukraine's desire to lift the remaining restrictions on the use of Western long-range strike systems is understandable. The Kursk offensive has prompted that conversation, but it needs to do much more. Again, the problem with these Western long-range weapon systems that Ukraine wants to use across the rest of Russia is that they don't exist in nearly large enough numbers. They already have been insufficient to change the dynamics of the fighting strategically along the line of contact and immediately behind it. We heard all of these narratives about how HIMARS was going to disrupt Russian logistics. Russian logistics adapted and overcame the presence of HIMARS. Now you're talking about taking this very limited number of long-range capabilities and spreading it out across a much wider area. Yes, you will score a lot of PR points. You will almost certainly get missiles through and hit high-value targets across Russia, but Russia is the largest nation by land area on Earth. Its military-industrial base is massive. It is spread out over a huge distance. There is no way you're going to disrupt Russian combat operations by using a limited number of long-range weapons to strike at these capabilities. Think about how Ukraine has already been using Western long-range weapons on Crimea. Crimea is being used to launch airstrikes, missile strikes. There's air defense systems based there. There's naval facilities based there. Ukraine did manage to succeed in disrupting Russia's naval presence there to an extent, but in all other regards, they have failed. If they cannot succeed in isolating and containing Crimea, how are they going to isolate and contain Russian military capabilities across the rest of Russia? It's completely unrealistic. Then it says, holding Kursk as a bargaining chip, expanding strikes, and putting economic pressure on Russia could significantly strengthen Ukraine's hand, assuming Ukraine can also hold the line, exhaust Russia's offensive potential, and withstand Russia's strike campaign this winter. However, it ends, the Kursk offensive needs to provide the impetus for Ukraine and its partners to get on the same page and shake off the current drift. Well, the current drift is evidence of just how decisive Russia's strategy of attrition has been and will continue being. There is this drift. There's this gloomy narrative, this perception that Ukraine is losing, because it is losing, precisely because of Russia's strategy of attrition. So again, this obsession with Russia isn't taking huge tracts of territory. Therefore, its military operations, its advantages are not decisive. They are decisive. This is the New York Times. This is September 12th, 2024. Biden poised to approve Ukraine's use of long-range Western weapons in Russia. The topic will be on the agenda. This was on Friday with the first official visit to Washington by Britain's new Prime Minister, Keir Starmer. Now, it appears that the US and the UK have concluded that they're not going to give Ukraine permission to use these weapons. We heard U.S. Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin talk about how even if this permission was given to Ukraine, the primary objective, at least the stated objective, is to strike at Russian air power on the ground before they launch these glide bombs that are devastating Ukrainian positions all along the line of contact. And Secretary Austin said that Russian air power has been moved beyond the range of these weapons. So even if we give permission to Ukraine to use these weapons, they're not going to be able to target these air bases because they have been moved back. There are many air bases all across Russia. They can move these warplanes back further. It will take them longer to reach targets, but they're still going to get there. They're still going to drop their glide bombs, and they're still going to devastate the line of contact, Ukrainian defensive positions along the line of contact. What is authorizing Ukraine to launch long-range weapons into the rest of Russia going to do? Yes, it will raise the cost for Russia. It's going to force Russian troops and air power to be moved back and to be dispersed, which puts strain on Russia's military. But these are all costs that Russia is willing to pay. They can pay and they will pay. What it's also going to do is deplete the number of long-range weapon systems the United States and Europe have available to them. And I've talked extensively how the conflict in Ukraine is not being fought in isolation. It's part of a global strategy to eliminate all peer and near-peer competitors, especially China. The United States needs every long-range weapon it has to fight the war it is trying to provoke with China. If it is handing these weapons over to Ukraine to use on Russia, it'll deplete these weapons. They will not have any or enough of them to fight this war they want with China. Now, finally, I have said many times, at this point, it's clear that the United States is not going to defeat Russia using Ukraine as a proxy. But we have to remember where this proxy war stemmed from, the US foreign policy objective this proxy war stemmed from in the first place. I have exhaustively referenced this Rand Corporation paper titled Extending Russia Competing from Advantageous Ground. This was published in 2019, and it laid out every single option the US has since exercised one way or another at trying to bait Russia into conflict and overextend it, hopefully to precipitate a Soviet-style collapse of the Russian Federation. Now, if we look at the table of contents, you will see many very familiar measures that the US has already since taken. We're already in the process of taking or have since taken. Provide lethal aid to Ukraine, and I've gone over this one many, many times. The whole point was to provoke Russia into a large-scale conflict in Ukraine, hopefully to overextend it militarily and cause a collapse. The US also proposed continuing support of Syrian rebels. By that, they mean Al-Qaeda and ISIS, which they have continued doing, but has likewise failed to significantly overextend Russia. Promote regime change in Belarus. Again, this was 2019. Since then, the US has attempted to overthrow the government in Belarus, exploit tensions in the South Caucus, what we've been hearing about Georgia, Armenia, Azerbaijan, reduce Russian influence in Central Asia. That has been ongoing. We've been hearing about Moldova. And then there are these options here, ideological and informational measures, pathways for influence operations. Let's take a look at this one closer. It says, the hold that regimes have on power can weaken or collapse for many reasons, from external invasion to coups to a withdrawal of popular support. While Russia does have genuine external security concerns, this chapter focuses on potential domestic threats to regime stability. In particular, it focuses on the prospects for widespread popular dissatisfaction with the regime. So they're talking about the US sponsoring and perpetuating popular dissatisfaction in Russia to undermine and overthrow the regime. Regime change, the color revolution option that the United States used in 2014 in Ukraine to overthrow the elected government of Ukraine and install a client regime in its place. The political capture of Ukraine. They're talking about doing this in regards to Russia. Now, look at this Business Insider article. This is from September 9th, 2024. The plot to topple Putin. A growing army of Russian exiles want to take back Russia. Can they succeed? And they act as if these people are all acting independently. They just all coincidentally are based in Washington, D.C. And one of them, they even admit that they are receiving funding from the International Republican Institute, which is a subsidiary of the U.S. National Endowment for Democracy, the premier agency funding political interference around the globe, funding and organizing and directing color revolutions all around the globe. So this is what the United States is doing. Yes, they continue waging this proxy war against Russia. They are not trying to save or defend Ukraine. They intend to fight Russia to the last Ukrainian until there is nothing left of Ukraine that is able to fight on, to raise the cost as high as possible while they continue exercising all of these other options that we see them laying out in this Rand Corporation paper. And they have a similar, identical, I would say, strategy aimed at China as well. So the United States, again, we have to remember that the proxy war is important to understand and to follow. There's so much that we can learn about modern warfare and the direction of geopolitics by examining deeply what is happening in Ukraine. We have to zoom out and look at the geopolitical strategic lay of what is happening, that this conflict is unfolding within. This is just one of several measures the US is using to put pressure on Russia to try to collapse it. And we can see how Russia is not just waging this war essentially against the US, the rest of NATO, via Ukraine. Inside Ukraine, we can see that Russia is working internationally with China, with Brazil, with India, with South Africa, the original BRICS members, and now the growing list of nations that are either joining BRICS now or want to join BRICS. And we have to understand that everything Russia does in Ukraine has to fit in logically, strategically, and diplomatically to this much larger strategy Russia is pursuing to defend itself against what is a full spectrum conflict the US is waging on Russia, not just in Ukraine, but all around the globe and even within Russian borders themselves. And again, just look at this article. I mean, this is the way they try to word this, the way they try to present this is to maintain plausible deniability as much as possible. But what they are actually admitting to is the fact that, yes, the United States is heavily invested in toppling the Russian government from within, not just the proxy war in Ukraine to weaken and overextend Russia, but attempts to undermine Russia within as well. So everything we hear from the United States about how Russia or China are trying to interfere in the US and topple democracy, challenge and topple democracy worldwide is actually projection. It's what the US is doing to Russia and China, to which Russia and China are reacting. It's very important to understand all of this. It's important to keep track of the conflict in Ukraine itself, and also to zoom out and keep an eye on the larger geopolitical trajectory all of this is taking. So I will continue keeping an eye on all of that. If you thought this video in particular was useful, please like and share. Think about subscribing. It's free to do. It helps the channel grow. Check the video description below for other ways you can find and follow my work. I have my work on YouTube, on Rumble. All of my videos are also backed up on Telegram. On Telegram, I am able to publish absolutely everything at the moment, even my articles that I write for New Eastern Outlook. The links to New Eastern Outlook articles are currently blocked on X. Also in the video description below, you will find all of the links that I referenced, as well as for ways you can help support my work. I do not monetize any of my social media platforms. If ads pop up, feel free to skip them. If you do want to help support my work, please do so through Buy Me a Coffee and also through Patreon. To everyone who has been helping out, whether it's a one-time donation, donations month to month, or even if you have no extra resources to spare and you're just helping share my work with others, getting the word out there, all of that is greatly appreciated. That is what makes this work possible. So thank you. And as always, thank you for watching.
I'm pretty certain he's in cahoots with the people who eventually put the pen on paper and sanction these things. Because ultimately, those are not the people actually paying for these things. They just sanction them. You are going to be the one paying for it. Hello, my friends. I hope you're all having a fantastic Sunday. Ukrainska Pravda is bringing you a report from Reuters. I know, I appreciate the irony as well, trust me. And this report essentially suggests that Volodymyr Zelensky, he's misled a few people. Now, I was shocked, and I'm sure you're shocked as well, because we all know that Volodymyr Zelensky is a man of principle, he's a man of honor. He would never do such a thing. But regardless, we still have to do our own due diligence and see what this report is saying, and then compare it to reality and see if they're right. Oh, what a way to kickstart the Sunday, isn't it? Kiev initially asked United States for ATACMS strikes on Russian air bases, but then changed targets, Reuters is saying. So, in very few words, bait and switch. That's the translation of the entire title, bait and switch. And I'm sure most of you would be familiar with what this is, but if you're not, what bait and switch is a very common tactic. When you want to ask something of someone and you're not sure how they will react, you present something that looks very good. And people will start thinking about it. But by the time the people finish thinking about it and coming up with a positive answer, usually, the whole thing becomes something different entirely. You know, that's the bait and switch. You show them something and give them something else. Okay, let's carry on. Ukraine initially asked the United States to let it use long-range ATACMS missiles to hit Russian airfields, but now potential targets for Ukraine's long-range strikes include Russian military command centers, fuel and weapons depots, and troop concentrations. By the time this will be approved, because I think it will be approved at some point, it will include everything else. So way beyond the troop concentrations, way beyond the fuel depots and all of that, because this is how it works. Now, before I carry on with the article, I want to say something that I really think it's important. I think it comes a time when you will really have to take a step back and look at the bigger picture. And in the bigger picture, it's easy to say, well, it's Russia against the West or the West against Russia. But really, it's not that simple. You see, let's stick to the Russians for a second. The interests of the Russian people and the Russian government, they pretty much go hand in hand with very few divergence from that. But then when you go to the other side, to the collective West, which in this I will include Ukraine as well, well, that's a whole different ballgame. Because let's actually stay with Ukraine. You have Volodymyr Zelensky and his government who have their own interests irrespective of the Ukrainian people. Then you have the Ukrainian people who have their own interests. What do they care about? Well, having heat, having food, having an economy, a functioning economy, having this war finished with. A lot of different interests than what Zelensky has. Then you go towards the West, or actually to the Eastern Europe. Then you have Poland. What are Poland's interests? Because they're very different from pretty much everyone else in Europe. Poland wants to become the new Germany, at least in the military sense. Okay, that already sets them apart from the rest. Then you go towards Western Europe. What do you have there? Well, you have a whole bunch of politicians who are very unpopular in their own countries. That, again, sets them different targets than the rest of the alliance. Then you go across the ocean, and that's where the big game actually is. Biden has his own interest, including the Biden family, you know what I'm talking about. Then you have what? You have the rest of the Biden administration, people like Blinken, people like Sullivan. Now, they know they're on their way out, but they don't want to go out empty-handed, right? They have their own interest. Then you have the MIC, the good old military-industrial complex. Now, these are the people who win regardless of what everyone else does. And I'll explain why. So far, they've been contracted for hundreds of billions of dollars to produce armaments and equipment for this war. I would even argue that they would win even more money if Russia wins this conflict, because then they'll have a reason to say, well, we've told you so, you're not investing enough. You need to give us more money so we can produce more. And that's exactly what will probably happen. Mark my words. Then who else do you have in the United States? Because there's another branch, a big, very important branch. Those are the people you don't see. The neocons behind the neocons we see in the newspaper and on TV. There's so many interests. And the point I'm trying to make here is I think we need to separate the idea of the collective West against Russia. The only thing that unites these people in the collective West is the fact that they all want a piece of the pie. But you see, there's two pieces of that pie, or at least, oh no, it's two pies, okay? One pie is the money, the taxpayers' money, which they then reinvest in the arms industry that produces kickbacks and all of that. And then there's the other pie, and that pie is called Russia. If they win, hypothetically speaking, they get to divide Russia, break it apart, and plunder it. Now, I think as time goes on, they pretty much forgot about the Russia piece of the pie, but there's still the other one, the taxpayer. Okay? So with that in mind, this is what I want you to understand, all of you. It's not simple to talk about the collective West because there's so much in it. Now, let's get back to the article and see how that relates to what we're going to see in a second. Two European diplomats, speaking on condition of anonymity, said that Ukraine has given the United States and the United Kingdom a list of potential targets in Russia that could be hit by Western long-range weapons if allowed. So that means that if they need the US and the UK to sanction something, that by definition to me is not the hallmark of a sovereign country. So when people tell you we need to defend democracy and the sovereignty of Ukraine, I hope you all understand it's a joke, and it's not a good joke, because ultimately the losers of this conflict are the Ukrainian people and the Russian people. And in this case, the European and the American taxpayers. Everyone else wins. Everyone else wins. All the entities that I've mentioned from the collective West. The officials say that the Ukrainians initially wanted to use US long-range ATACMS missiles to hit Russian air bases. No, I would argue until tomorrow that that's not true. They've said that, but that was never their intention. That was just to start the conversation. Let's imagine I want $1 million from you, and I know you can give it to me, but you're going to be very reluctant. Now, what I'll do, I'm not going to start by saying I want $1 million. I'll say, well, can you maybe give me $10,000? You're already thinking, well, I need to think about it. And I say, okay, that's fantastic. You think about it. In the meantime, I'm going to leak it to the media. So now the whole world knows that, look, you and I are having conversations about this. Because you have trained the world to be on my side, as in Ukraine. Now the world is expecting you to make a decision that's favorable to me. By the time you make that decision, I'm going to keep upping my demands to the point where I will get to the $1 million. And at that point, it's going to be very hard for you to say no because you look very weak. This is the game, my friends. And look, we can say all sorts of things about Zelensky, but this guy, he doesn't care what the world thinks of him. He doesn't care how low he needs to go. And look, I'm pretty certain he's in cahoots with the people who eventually put the pen on paper and sanction these things. Because ultimately, those are not the people actually paying for these things. They just sanction them. You are going to be the one paying for it. However, the Pentagon has said that 90% of the Russian aircraft that launch glide bombs, one of the main threats to Ukraine, are based at airfields at least 300 kilometers from Ukrainian controlled territory. This puts them out of range of the ATACMS missiles or systems. Well, it doesn't matter because, like I keep saying, that was never the goal. That was just the conversation starter, the pretext. The officials say that Ukraine now wants to use the missiles to strike Russian military command centers, fuel and weapons depots and troop concentrations. In addition to the US-supplied ATACMS, Kiev wants to strike Russia from afar using UK-provided Storm Shadow missiles and the French Scalp missiles, which are virtually equivalent to the Storm Shadows. Now listen to this one, because this one will make you laugh very hard. Spoiler alert. Although the UK is expected to seek US approval before lifting the restrictions on Storm Shadow missiles, a French diplomatic source said Paris does not need Washington's permission for Ukraine to use French missiles, the publication said. So the French, you do not mess with the French. They're very powerful. They don't need anybody's permission, let alone Washington. We make our own decisions. We are the French people. I think, obviously, I'm not trying to represent the French people here, but there's one particular character, the little Napoleon. I think that's how Alice Christoforou calls him, Emmanuel Macron. He's the one who is very vocal. He imagines himself as being some sort of general. I mean, I think his best days are probably behind him from a political perspective. He's had a good run a few years back, but because he's messed it up, I think is pure incompetence, to be honest. But regardless, he's managed to damage his image to a point where I think there is absolutely no way he's going to get any of that back. But still, it doesn't hurt to posture a little bit. Yeah, the France doesn't need Washington's permission. That's all you need to remember. They're fully sovereign, unlike someone else. Reuters writes that while the US and the UK are discussing the possibility of allowing Ukraine to use Western weapons to strike deep into Russia, some US officials are deeply skeptical that this will have a significant impact on Kiev's fight against Russia. So, those skeptical people are basically saying what you and I have been saying for so long, which is regardless of Ukraine using those missiles or not, from a military perspective, the situation on the battlefield will simply not change. There is no way to change that, not with a few missiles, not even with a lot more missiles. It can't be changed because the problems are much deeper rooted. But listen, because as we go through the last 3 paragraphs that we have, I promise you, is going to be one that really stands out. US official noted that Ukraine already has the capability to strike targets in Russia using drones. The US long-range ATACMS missiles could enhance this capability, but they are too expensive and limited in numbers to change the dynamic, they said. Well, it doesn't matter, because like I keep saying, it is not about winning the war. I know that's what they want us to believe, that it's about winning. We need to help Ukraine win. Ukraine is not going to win this conflict under any normal circumstances because it simply can't. It doesn't have the manpower, it doesn't have the equipment, it doesn't have the resilience, and simply Russia is just represents too much power compared to Ukraine. Now, there's that. So what is it then about if it's not about winning? Well, it's about money. It all comes down to money. And that's about it. Now, the only way, and I keep saying this, but for those of you who haven't been following my channel, I will say it again. For Zelensky, this stopped being about winning a very, very long time ago, if it ever was. At this point for him, his ultimate card that he wants to play, but he doesn't have it just yet, is trying to drag the rest of the nations in NATO into the war. And the way he's trying to get that done is by antagonizing the Russians, and this is the perfect vehicle for that, these long-range missiles, because with these, he might not be able to hit something crucial, as the Americans are saying, or at least some Americans are saying, that the Russians have moved their critical things out of the range of these missiles. However, what he can still hit is anything else, anything and everything else. And that is the thing. He's trying to antagonize the Russians into doing something maybe overly aggressive that he can then take back to NATO saying, well, I've told you, you need to help me because now look at what the Russians are doing. That's his ultimate game. There is no way out except this one, and even this one is not a guarantee. But that's exactly the gist of it. In addition, Kremlin has largely removed perhaps the most immediate threat, Russian aircraft carrying glide bombs from the range of the US missiles, US officials say. They also assumed, pay attention to this one, they also assumed Kiev should focus on stopping the Russian offensive on Ukraine's east. That word assumed, that's the very wrong word for that sentence. It's not assumed, it's advised, urged, if anything, not assumed. Basically, they're telling Ukraine, look, stop talking about these missiles and focus on the Eastern Front because you're getting absolutely smashed over there. That's really the gist of that last line over there. But again, it's not about winning. It's not about stopping anything. It's about escalating. And I will have another video coming out about Zelensky's victory plan. Apparently, there's a victory plan in which he has all the details of how he will defeat Russia. I'm going to post that video also.
Cool figure. Follow me.